In a faraway land, an old man was enjoying a rich stew. It is served with a dipping sauce made from the meat of the neck of a giant dragon. Suddenly, a mythical creature called out to him by the name Lucial, asking about his next move. And would his father be proud to know that, years ago, he single-handedly defeated such a massive dragon? Lucial looked up at the sky, and memories of the past 70 years suddenly flooded back. That day, in a torrential downpour, he arrived in front of a huge mansion. That was also the day his father returned. Young Lucial eagerly ran to him, offering the baked cake he had made himself, hoping to receive a word of praise. However, things didn't go as expected. The man in front of him coldly tossed the cake to the ground, his eyes so sharp and terrifying that even a small child would tremble with fear. He was unhappy to see his son engrossed in cooking, instead of practicing swordsmanship or honing survival skills in the mountains and forests. Then another old man, the only one who dared to stand up and protect the boy from his father's wrath, appeared. He suffered severe consequences. He was punched and thrown against the wall with a single blow. The man was not only dissatisfied with his son, but he was even more unhappy that his father interfered in his own family affairs. Suddenly, Ristina, his wife, entered the hall, confronted by the man's rage. He reminded her of her responsibilities as a mother. However, Ristina disagreed. She emphatically declared that Sturm was her only child, and that she only acknowledged him. His rage flared up, and the man showed no mercy to anyone. He lunged forward, intending to attack Ristina. But this time, Lucial managed to stand in front of his mother, trying to intervene and taking all the blame upon himself. The atmosphere in the hall became suffocatingly tense. Then, in a low, dangerous voice, the man looked directly at Lucial and ordered him to go to the training grounds to hone his swordsmanship. That man was none other than Yaram Hao, the world's strongest swordsman, the one who holds the title of Sword Saint. Despite being a father, he never showed Lucial any pity. To him, Lucial was the one destined to inherit the title of Sword Saint, making it a family tradition. From the moment he was born, the boy was forced to learn swordsmanship. He honed his skills to become a sword saint, even having martial arts instilled in his young mind. A vast amount of knowledge that would normally take 20 years to acquire is crammed into the mind of an 8-year-old child. Even now, during every training session, he's still pushing himself to endure it. His father never goes easy on him. The boy fought with all his might, but was knocked down in the blink of an eye. It wasn't just because he was weak, but also because of a mysterious disease that was slowly eating away at his body from the inside. Despite the excruciating pain and ragged breaths, Lucial struggled to get up. However, Yarum, his cruel father, delivered the final blow, coldly declaring that his dream had crumbled. Yarum bluntly stated that he was unworthy of becoming powerful, much less capable of bearing the title of Sword Saint as he desired. He even venomously mentioned Lena, mocking her for giving birth to a defective, useless child who was worthless. Finally, before leaving the arena, Yarum declared that from now on, Lucial was no longer his son. Lucial lay sprawled on the ground, gradually losing consciousness. As delirium set in, painful memories flooded back, images of his mother, who had died shortly after giving birth to him. He was disappointed in himself. He had failed to live up to his mother's expectations. After a while, when his eyes slowly opened, Lucial found himself lying in bed, his entire body cleaned and carefully bandaged. Even more surprisingly, the person caring for him and healing him with healing magic was none other than Ristina, his stepmother. He was completely stunned to realize that, all this time, the person who had been taking care of him was actually her. Lucial was already afflicted with a terrible disease. The incessant coughing tormented him, leaving him weak and pleading for a little mercy. Finally, Ristina revealed the truth. All the suffering he endured stemmed from a dragon's curse. Lucial was stunned by this revelation, but the woman didn't stop there. She went on to explain that she was the one who had cursed him and his mother years ago. Before Lucial could react, she suddenly grabbed his shoulders, screaming hysterically about her ambition to turn Sturm, her own son, into something else, to become the next sword saint. From the beginning, her true goal was simply to become the mother of the next sword saint. Lushel couldn't believe what he was seeing. This wicked woman had brutally attacked his mother for such a selfish reason. Seeing the boy's pained expression, Ristina gave a wry smile and said that he should worry about himself more than mourning the deceased. He was about to be abandoned, banished to a desolate mountain region teeming with bloodthirsty monsters. The person behind that decision was none other than Yarum, his biological father. This truth was even more cruel to a child who was only 8 years old. Ristina chuckled with amusement, then coldly told him that, in the first place, he should never have been born. Ristina was nothing short of a real witch, willing to cast off her burdens with the desperate screams of a child, one about to become food for the monsters. At that moment, Lushel realized that her laughter no longer belonged to a human being. It was the laughter of a demon in human form. As that maniacal laugh echoed, his vision gradually darkened until he was completely plunged into darkness. The next time Lushel opened his eyes, he found himself in the middle of a dense forest. Confused, he glanced around, trying to determine his direction, but the surrounding scenery was completely unfamiliar. Before he could understand what was happening, he started playing with the insects flying around, then quickly realized he needed to set up camp before dark. A few minutes later, he located himself and luckily found some young acorns. These pellets contain flammable resin, which allows him to easily start a fire with minimal effort. Sitting quietly by the flickering firelight, Lushel suddenly remembered the moment he was abandoned by his own father. Tears welled up in Lushel's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. He refused to allow himself to be weak any longer and was determined to find a way to survive in the mountains. But fate played a cruel trick on him once again. A violent coughing fit struck, and this time he coughed up blood. The pain became increasingly unbearable, making him feel as if death was approaching. The hunger was so intense that it made his stomach ache. He was even willing to eat sand just to fill his stomach. But as he unconsciously reached out, he touched something soft and cool. Without caring what it was, he immediately put it in his mouth. The moment the first bite touches the tongue, a refreshing sweetness spreads, providing an incredibly pleasant sensation. He devoured it in seconds, savoring its smooth, creamy texture, that pure and refreshing feeling. Even more surprisingly, the pain disappeared immediately. Driven by curiosity, Lushel looked down at what he had just eaten. It was a slime. He was stunned for a moment, but hunger still lingered in his mind. Without thinking twice, he took another bite, once again immersing himself in that strangely sweet taste. This was strange. Lushel had never been taught that slime was edible. To verify if it was truly a monster, he attacked it with a broken branch. Shortly afterward, a magic stone fell out, confirming that it was indeed a monster. In essence, the monster's structure consists of a magic stone that acts as its heart, while the outer shell is its body. There are 2 ways to defeat a monster: shatter its magic stone or inflict enough damage to completely destroy its outer shell. That's also why he was taught never to eat monsters. However, in practice, Lushel realized that if he only destroyed the outer shell without damaging the magic stone, he could absolutely eat them. Time passed, and the very next day, Lushel had crafted a rudimentary axe by sharpening a stone and securing it to a sturdy branch. Before beginning his mission, he drank water from the nearby river, reassuring himself of his upcoming goal: to hunt down and identify monsters that could help him survive. Lushel quickly captured the slimes, having figured out how to attack them precisely without making their bodies disappear. But that wasn't enough. Determined to catch a bigger prey, he prepared more thoroughly this time. He crafted another weapon by bending a young tree trunk and braiding the bark tightly to make a bowstring. The finished product was just a simple bow, looking like a child's toy. But he still decided to give it a try. The arrows were also easy to make, and when they reached the riverbank, Lushel decided to patiently wait for his prey. After a while of waiting, a herd of deer finally appeared. Without hesitation, he quickly raised his bow. But just before he could shoot, a giant bird swooped down, snatched a fawn, and flew away. Like him, It had been waiting for the herd of deer. Lushel immediately recognized it as a black crow, a large species of crow that not only hunts deer, but is also capable of attacking tigers. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, he changed his target, aiming straight at the crow. Surprisingly, the arrow hit its mark. It was then that Lushel revealed the secret. He had poisoned the arrowheads using a highly toxic herb. The raven was still flying in the air, screaming in agony before plummeting to the ground. Lushel was thrilled that his prey was now within his grasp, but there is still one problem. You need to pick up the meat carefully. He knew how to dismantle the monster, but this time, he had to make sure not to damage the outer shell too much. Otherwise, the crow would disappear completely. In other words, he had to inflict pain on the crow while it was still alive in order to get his meal. Although unhappy about it, Lushel gently apologized to the animal before beginning. He used a rope to tie shut its desperate eyes, trying to soothe the prey's fear. Even so, tears still streamed down his face as he raised his weapon. But Lushel had no other choice. He had to eat if he wanted to survive. Time passed, and he finally obtained the breast meat. At that very moment, the crow vanished, leaving behind only the glittering magic stone. What's lost can't be recovered. So Lushel decided to enjoy the precious piece of meat in front of him. His next step was to check if it was actually edible. Lushel called out to the herd of monstrous deer from before to attract their attention. As they approached, he threw a piece of crow meat down. The deer ate heartily without showing any unusual signs. This reassured him that the meat was safe to eat. He began the preparation, starting with salting with rocks. Then they chopped the meat into small pieces and skewered it onto tree branches. As soon as the baking begins, the aroma wafted up, making him unable to resist drooling. Even though the meat wasn't fully cooked, Lushel pulled out the skewer and took the first bite. He was immediately captivated by its rich flavor. The umami flavor of the meat is truly addictive, and the abundant fat makes it even juicier than chicken. Without a second thought, he continued to devour the food, completely forgetting that he was eating monster flesh. For the first time in a long time, he had a proper meal. He ate until there was no more room in his stomach. But then a question arose. Why hadn't he had a seizure all day? Suddenly, a voice echoed in his ear, announcing that his night vision ability had been activated. That startled Lushel and filled him with fear. But as soon as he looked ahead, he immediately noticed the difference. Everything was clear despite the pitch-black sky. It was unbelievable that he had suddenly acquired such a skill. Skills are special abilities that improve physical fitness. They can only be acquired through rigorous training or through challenging rituals at church. Sitting on the ground, Lushel tried to figure out how he had acquired this skill. After a moment of thought, he suddenly realized. Could it be because of the monsters he had eaten? This is a plausible possibility. Books have mentioned that there are herbs that help boost physical strength. So, dragon or monster meat could also offer special effects in addition to its nutritional value. For the first time, Lushel felt he had something to hold on to. If used well, this skill would help him survive in this harsh forest. And perhaps, one day, earn his father's recognition. Looking up at the crescent moon hanging in the sky, Lushel Hao Tristan decides to begin a journey of studying monsters and surviving in the mountains and forests. Day after day, Lushel built a shelter on a giant tree. Today marks exactly 1 year since he was left behind on this mountain. His shelter was built with the help of a species of woodpecker bat, making it safer due to their distinctive scent. Over the past year, Lushel had become accustomed to life in the mountains. Thanks to the hunting skills and tools he had acquired, his life had improved considerably. The seizures also occurred less frequently, and he promised himself that one day he would conquer the disease. That morning, his breakfast consisted of leftover grilled fish from the previous day, quail eggs, and some wild vegetables. Despite having gone through many hardships, Lushel is now healthy, has enough to eat and wear, and no longer worries about scarcity as before. However, too much of anything is not good. He's starting to get tired of grilled meat. A wish crossed his mind. If only he had a pot, he could stew or boil his food instead of always grilling everything. Using his skills, Lushel tried to make clay pots and pans many times, but all his attempts failed. Either the heat-resistant leaves weren't thick enough to form an insulating layer, or the clay cracked after firing. As a result, he had to settle for grilled meat as usual that day. Suddenly, Lushel's gaze settled on an iron ant. This monster, rated E by explorers, is the size of a large dog and is a very difficult opponent to kill. Lushel's instincts told him this was just a scout, meaning the entire pack was preparing to move nests. If they build their nests near this area, your survival will be in danger. Assessing the situation, Lushel drew his weapon and leaped from his shelter, determined to deal with it before it was too late. Confident in his abilities, he taunted the monster. However, as soon as the iron ant lunged forward, Lushel switched to a tactic of luring it to a specific location. Being summoned and then lured away irritated the monster. But for Lushel, this wasn't too difficult. Over the past year, he has trained his body through daily chases, becoming stronger and more agile. Furthermore, the herbs in the forest have also helped to enhance his physical abilities. However, while he was still thinking about those things, he lost his focus and tripped right in front of the monster. The iron ant didn't miss its chance. It leaped up and attacked him with a lightning-fast pounce. Death seemed imminent. But at the last moment, Lushel cleverly used a rope to dodge the attack. Initially, Lushel didn't intend to use the rope to save himself, but rather to trap the monster. He successfully lured it to the net and bound it tightly inside. This net is made from forest spider silk. The monster is rated D. His next step was to make a cut in the hard shell of the iron ant so he could separate it for use. He used a thick knife with a blade made from the teeth of the rat monster Nipper. Although he still felt guilty about killing a living creature, but for the sake of survival, he continued his mission. After a while of struggling, Lushel managed to pry off a piece of the hard shell, large and sturdy enough to be used as a cooking pot. After gathering everything necessary, he decided to finish off the monster quickly. With a single decisive blow, the magic stone appeared. Before leaving, he thanked it for its contribution. Approaching the testing site, Lushel poured water into a pot and brought it to a boil. Each bubble that rose to the surface made his eyes light up with joy. Finally, when he saw that the water wasn't leaking, he shouted excitedly. He had successfully created a super durable pot. His eyes sparkled at the thought of all the delicious dishes he could prepare. Thanks to his new pot, Lushel was able to cook in a completely different way. For lunch that day, he decided to make braised young wild boar. According to the information he had, this was a Class E monster, the juvenile stage of a Class B giant monster. Typically, they move in groups alongside the adults. But thanks to the submerged net trap he had prepared beforehand, he caught a lone bird. After marinating the meat, Lushel proceeded to chop it into small cubes. Next, he blanched the meat in boiling water for a few minutes to remove any unpleasant odor. After completing all the steps, the braised wild boar dish was finally finished. The dish looked incredibly appetizing, and as always, from the very first bite, he experienced an indescribably wonderful flavor. With just one bite, the sweet, juicy meat juices spread throughout your mouth. It tasted infinitely better than the burnt, charred, grilled meat he'd eaten before. And so, before long, the gluttonous boy devoured the entire pot of stew. Even in that moment of satisfaction, he was still thinking about finding fish sauce and sake to make the dish even tastier. Lushel was enjoying the best part of his life, especially since today had gone so smoothly. He spent the whole day immersed in studying herbs and carving shapes from monster materials. Everything was perfect. Life in the mountains was truly becoming more and more fulfilling. But upon returning to his cave, a surprise awaited him. As soon as he arrived, Lushel's eyes widened in astonishment. "Your lair has been torn apart right in the middle." Upon closer inspection, all the food supplies that had been stockpiled for a year had disappeared. Unable to stand idly by, Lushel climbed a giant, ancient tree to search for the person who had stolen his food. He hoped it was just some kind of wild animal, but when his vision cleared, the truth was revealed. The culprit was a troll. A troll, the supreme lord of the jungle. For the first time in his life, Lucial saw it with his own eyes. But he understood one thing clearly. He had to leave immediately, because the chances of survival were almost zero. That day, he vowed to become even stronger, and for the next 10 years, Lucial threw himself into relentless training, honing both his strength and his willpower. 10 years later, one day, the troll is once again hunting a tiny mythical creature. In an instant, its brutal swing nearly crushed the poor animal. But this time, Lucial returned and rushed to save it. Lucial never forgot what that ultimate monster had done to his lair, and today, he was determined to take it down, alone. Lucial charged forward, his sword swinging fiercely toward his enemy, but the troll, with overwhelming strength, immediately raised its massive rock to block the blow. Then, right after, it counterattacked. A ferocious swing carrying the might of the Lord of the Jungle, but Lucial was no ordinary opponent. In an instant, he changed tactics and unleashed a flame shot. The flame shot straight towards the troll, aiming directly at its eyes. A roar erupted. The monster was temporarily blinded. This was Lucial's chance to counterattack. His sword traced a line across his opponent's flesh. Though the wound was shallow, he didn't stop, continually unleashing streams of blazing fire. Before long, the entire battlefield was engulfed in flames. Lucial stood firm, waiting for the inevitable to happen. And just as expected, the troll stuck out its monstrous long tongue. Lucial knew the secret of this species very well. They lacked well-developed sweat glands, forcing them to stick out their tongues to cool themselves down. And that was their fatal weakness. Seizing the opportunity, he lunged forward, swinging his sword powerfully, slicing through the giant tongue. As the surrounding temperature continued to rise, the monster's rage blazed like a raging fire. In a fit of rage, it reached out and grabbed Lucial. It caught him, but the very next second, its eyes flashed with confusion. Empty hands. Lucial had succeeded. Using the shadow puppeteer technique, he had broken through the monster's last line of defense, but instead of attacking immediately, Lucial activated X-ray vision, scanning its entire body for vital points. As soon as he identified his target, he swung his sword, a precise finishing blow. He realized that every monster possessed a magical circuit containing an enormous amount of energy, and once attacked, the chances of survival were almost zero. With a decisive sword stroke, the ultimate troll completely vanished. Lucial gazed at the battlefield, now reduced to ashes and the lingering echoes of destructive power. 10 years of arduous training had finally yielded well-deserved results. But amidst his pride and victory, he suddenly remembered the little mythical creature was still in his pocket. With a touch of mischief, Lucial claimed that he was the one who saved it from Apex's claws. But that creature, it seemed different. When Lucial inquired, the truth was revealed. It was hungry. After thinking for a while about what to feed it, Lucial's eyes suddenly fell on the troll's tongue. Despite the gruesome appearance, Lucial grilled and prepared the enormous tongue, slicing it into thick pieces and not hesitating to try a bite. As always, the first taste filled him with excitement. Out of kindness, he also shared a portion with the little creature. It enjoyed its meal with great relish, but fate had no peace for them. In an instant, both were surrounded. A huge horde of monsters appeared, numerous enough to be called a beastly storm. They were drawn in by the aroma of the steaming steak. This time, Lucial was no longer the carefree fool he once was. He immediately drew his sword, ready for battle. Using his new skill, Roaring Battle Aura, he provoked the monsters, causing the space to tremble with the roar of battle. But before they could act, the tiny creature suddenly lunged forward and let out a deafening roar. Not only the monsters, but even Lucial felt a chill. Could this tiny creature also wield the Roaring Battle Aura? But that wasn't the scariest thing. Immediately afterward, the tiny creature lunged straight into the pack of monsters. Each movement was like an invisible slash, taking down hordes of enemies in the blink of an eye. It turns out that the Roaring War Aura not only threatens the enemy, but also paralyzes them, freezing them in place precisely when needed. In the blink of an eye, the creature had wiped out the entire horde of monsters. Lushel looked around at the pile of corpses, his heart filled with gratitude. He bowed his head, thanking the tiny creature for becoming his savior. At that moment, the creature began to walk. Lushel followed out of curiosity, and the two entered a ruined area, the clear evidence of a fierce battle between two gigantic monsters. From the rubble, the creature picked up a magic stone and gave it to Lushel. Its eyes showed a hint of sadness as it recounted its orphaned past. Its parents had perished in a battle with a giant troll. Those words struck the deepest corner of Lushel's heart. Painful memories flooded back, bringing to light his past filled with loss. Despite being stronger after 10 years of training, the gap between him and his great father remained insurmountable. Lost in thought, Lushel suddenly felt a warmth. A creature with a small body was trying to comfort him. The feeling made Lushel smile. He placed his hand on its head and decided to name it Alma. It was an ancient word, meaning heroic. Hearing this, Alma laughed. Her eyes lit up with delight, as if she loved the name very much. But in that moment of peace, a gigantic shadow swept across the sky. Lushel looked up, and his heart suddenly pounded. A dragon! Those dragons only appear a few times a year, but even a fleeting glimpse of them is enough to send trolls into a panic, hiding in their burrows. That time, as Lushel gazed at the colossal monster in the sky, a daring thought flashed through his mind. If I could kill a dragon, perhaps my father would acknowledge me. With that determination, he clenched his fists, his sharp gaze fixed on the sky. He would hunt that dragon. And so, the two friends silently stepped into the night of the forest. 60 years had passed. It took Lushel that long to gather enough confidence to face the dragon. But this time, Alma, his longtime companion, was worried. Lushel laughed, teasingly asking if he was getting old. In fact, Alma was worried about Lushel. Age had left its mark on his face, the wrinkles and calluses of time, but even as he grew older, he still cherished the youthful face he once had in his memories. However, now, the most important thing was the life-or-death battle ahead. They were ready. As the dragon charged, Lushel reminded them that female dragons were so hot they could melt rock. And then, the final battle broke out. Only they faced the ultimate evil dragon, a colossal, terrifying monster. The dragon struck first, spewing out a blazing stream of fire that incinerated everything in its path, just as they had predicted. Alma immediately counterattacked, unleashing a powerful beam of light to stop the flames. In that blinding light, Lushel lunged forward, wielding his legendary dragon killer sword, launching the first attack. But the demonic dragon quickly dodged. Seizing the opportunity, it swung its enormous tail to attack the old man. Somehow, Lushel blocked the attack, but that very moment opened the way for the dragon to deliver a fatal blow with its sharp claws. Lushel had been waiting for this moment. He signaled to Alma. Immediately, Alma acted, using magic to freeze the dragon's movements. Lushel didn't miss the opportunity. He swung his dragon killer, repeatedly slashing at various parts of the monster's body. However, the dragon remained unwavering. It opened its demonic eyes, unleashing a cursed power that completely paralyzed Lushel's body. Alma realized the danger. Without hesitation, he rushed forward to protect his comrades. He successfully rescued Lushel, but his face was flushed red because of his reckless act. Lushel thanked Alma for her help in the battle. He knew perfectly well that if his father had been here, this evil dragon wouldn't have survived this long. Once again, he plunged into battle, his mind filled only with his father's extraordinary strength. But then the last memory echoed. Those harsh words. A flawed wretch. He fell into thought again, and that was the opportunity the dragon had been waiting for. It immediately spewed out another stream of deadly fire. Lushel still considered himself a defective product. It took him 60 years to defeat a dragon, but little did he know that he had survived the inferno thanks to his heat resistance. For the first time in the battle, the dragon began to tremble. Alma realized it was trying to escape, but Lushel had no way of letting the monster get away. Although he had never reached his father's level for the past 60 years, childhood, adulthood, and old age, he had poured his entire life into waiting for this moment. Thinking this, he gathered all his strength and swung the final blow. This time, it was enough to finish off the monster. The evil dragon finally fell, blood gushing from its mouth, confirming that they had defeated the ultimate dragon. As usual, Lucial approached to dissect the dragon. First, he bowed his head in gratitude to the monster for bestowing upon him this precious piece of meat. Then they began to slice it. Each piece of meat was revealed. A perfect display of beauty with the softest, smoothest texture. On the way back, Alma couldn't hide her excitement, her mouth watering as she imagined the grand party that awaited her. Conversely, Lucial considered opting for a lighter meal. After all, old age had diminished his interest in heavy dishes. His nest at that time was made of intertwined ancient tree roots, forming a space that he had meticulously cultivated over the past 70 years. To survive, he underwent countless experiments, adjustments, and studies. He stockpiled everything he needed: grain, vegetables, vinegar, Eastern spices, sugar, salt, sauces, herbs, and countless secret flavorings. He acquired all that knowledge by eating the flesh of mythical beasts, each meal a moment of enlightenment. Now, it's time to prepare the dragon feast. Lucial gently glided the knife across each piece of meat, revealing its tenderness and glistening sheen. While making it, he decided on a special dish for Alma and a portion for himself. After a few minor setbacks, the grand feast was finally completed. And this time, the main course is Dragon Fire Shabu, a spectacular version of shabu shabu made with dragon meat. However, Alma wasn't very interested, as he preferred steak. But anyway, Lucial dipped the piece of meat into the sauce and took a bite. And at that very moment, heaven opened in his mouth. Seeing Alma's delighted expression, Lucial simply smiled and explained, "It's thanks to a special sauce made from vinegar, mirin, soy sauce, and a touch of citrus juice. A perfect recipe called ponzu, a perfect match for shabu shabu." Lucial continued to savor the meal, and Alma quickly joined in. The first bite had already captivated him, and they had a whole pile of meat before them. So they ate and ate until they couldn't fit another bite in. After a short break, Alma suddenly asked Lucial what his next step was. Did he plan to see his father again? Deep down, Lucial knew that his father had probably passed away, for human life is inherently limited. As for Alma, he worried that once Lucial left, he would be alone again. Therefore, Lucial decided to continue living in this place. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. They were still enjoying the moment, but then everything began to glow. Their bodies burst into flames. Something is changing. This suggests as though Lucial's curse has been lifted. Alma suddenly transformed back into her former youthful form. As expected, the same thing happened to Lucial. He reverted to the childish appearance of an 8-year-old. Both were stunned. This was undoubtedly the effect of the ultimate dragon meat they had just eaten. But the real shock didn't stop there. When Alma checked Lucial's condition, he was horrified to discover that Lucial had become immortal. He couldn't believe his eyes. Something like that. Could it really be possible? Back to the story, Lucial How Tristan, our protagonist, was abandoned in the jungle when he was just 5 years old. For 60 years, he trained himself alongside his companion Alma with only one goal in mind: to defeat the ultimate evil dragon. And yet now, simply by eating that monster, he has become immortal. It's that simple. Time flies by like a gust of wind. 300 years have passed, yet Alma and Lucial still retain their youthful appearances. Alma is not satisfied with today. Once again, he had to eat the same old food they'd been eating for years. Both he and Lucial knew their menu was shrinking, but at least they were still alive. Amidst all of that, Alma unexpectedly spoke up, asking Lucial if he ever regretted leaving the outside world. Alma wanted to explore the world, but Lucial, though possessing the body of a child, had the mind of an adult, was perfectly fine with life for him. Nevertheless, the boy hurried away, making up an excuse that he was going to pick fruit. But on the way back, each step gradually pulled him back to reality. He told himself, it would be a lie to say he had never regretted the outside world. For 300 years isolated among these mountains, he began to wonder, does another world truly exist beyond this dense forest? At that moment, a chill ran down his spine. Something appeared. When he turned around, a group of people were in the woods. After so many years, he saw living people for the first time. Initially, he was confused. But when he realized one of them was dying, he gradually calmed down. The woman was on the verge of death, and Lucial wondered, should he save the stranger's life? Ignoring any hesitation, his human instincts kicked in, making it impossible for him to ignore the situation. Conversely, the other three were astonished to see a child appear in the middle of this wilderness. Lucial spoke, but his voice was ancient. This left them stunned into silence. They didn't fully understand what he was saying. But Lucial ignored that and started rummaging through his bag. Shortly afterward, he pulled out a bottle of medicine and offered to treat the injured man. The girl in the group hesitated a little, but to prove the medicine wasn't poisonous, Lucial tried it herself first. The most handsome man in the group observed for a moment, then agreed to give it a try. Without hesitation, he took the bottle of medicine and gave it to the patient to drink. Before long, the patient's condition gradually stabilized. Lucial then provided shelter for the group, guiding them to his treehouse. None of them could believe their eyes. Such luxury in such a remote place. Alma was also bewildered by the situation. The girl in the group, seeing that the patient had recovered a little magical energy, immediately prepared to use healing magic. Realizing she needed more magical power, Lucial gave her something that helped her regain her energy. The girl, without a moment's hesitation, devoured the food, and her condition began to change immediately. She began to experience a strange sensation, but in an instant, her expression changed completely. The others were astonished, while the girl savored the exquisite taste. It was like fruit juice, like aristocratic pastries. Immediately afterward, she felt a stream of pure energy flowing through her body, prompting her to instantly begin the healing process. In fact, Lucial had used slime magic to create the healing candy that the girl had just eaten. She continued her work and began to pray to Ariel, the goddess of healing. The goddess's magical light shone down, and the girl gradually regained consciousness. The healer was happy with her task, and the hero turned back to thank Lucial for everything that had happened. Without wasting a second, the hero introduced himself as Freddy, and Lucial politely responded. Freddy was truly grateful to Lucial for everything, and the whole thing remained a great mystery to him. Driven by curiosity, Freddy decided to ask about Lucial's true identity. Alma knew beforehand that no one would believe them if they said they were immortal. So after a moment of thought, Lucial lied. He said he had been abandoned in the mountains, and were fortunate to survive thanks to their knowledge of food and medicine. However, the boy wasn't lying. Freddy continued to question him, asking how long Lucial had been there. Lucial stammered, and Freddy showed concern about what he was saying. Lucial expected to be attacked, but unexpectedly, Freddy knelt down, tears streaming down his face, and hugged Lucial tightly as a way of showing his concern. For a long time, Lucial hadn't met anyone like this, and a smile spread across his face. He had met a truly kind person. The other two were also very interested in Lucial, and upon seeing this scene, the boy couldn't hold back his tears of happiness. These adventurers showed him the most basic human concerns. Whether it's a young boy or a 300-year-old child, those tiny tears turned into a heavy rain, and with just 3 hugs from them, memories of his mother's death and his father's abandonment suddenly flooded Lucial's mind. He also teared up. Lucial wiped away her tears and tried to regain her composure. Then asked them about their work on the mountain. Finally, they decided to officially introduce themselves. Freddy, Garner, Litra, and Mildy. They were knights serving the Duke of Lativia. They are tasked with retrieving Lavicia's family heirloom gemstone from the thieves. These were the family's heirloom gemstones, kept under the watchful eye of the Knight Order. And when they tried to retrieve them from the thieves' hideout, they were all defeated. In short, they were all ambushed and forced to retreat, despite each being very strong. This shows that the thieves truly had seasoned warriors. The group planned to attack again, but once more, Lucial offered help. Freddy, however, refused, asking to handle the problem himself. Lucial did not object and agreed immediately. They all rested for a while and were offered drinks by the host for the night. Surprisingly, all four fell asleep peacefully, letting their guard down. Lucial was the one who added the magic powder to the drink to make them sleep soundly and restore their strength. Alma was the most worried at the moment, and Lucial was determined to help these people, even if only a little, so he asked Alma to stay and help them recover. Meanwhile, I leaped into the dark sky, beginning my mission. Upon reaching the altitude, Lucial could see the roads and wondered how much the population had spread over the past 300 years so that he could ambush them. No one knew that Lucial had used his presence-sensing ability and quickly identified the thieves' medicinal herbs who were sharpening their knives. The boy knew perfectly well that they wouldn't be staying in this spot all night, given the existence of the magical beast. Without hesitation, Lucial immediately headed towards their lair, leaving his friends surprised by his presence. This was not a good sign, but Lucial paid no heed to his presence and immediately warned the thieves not to harm the adventurers. He continued to mock them and told them to go home, but the thieves looked at him in astonishment. They couldn't hold back their laughter and eventually burst into uncontrollable fits of laughter. At first, Lucial waited, but then he lunged towards them, unleashing a swift blow that was invisible to the average person. All the thieves fell to the ground at once, and they realized that their attacker wasn't a child. It took them a while to regain their composure. However, Lucial warned them to forget everything they had experienced there. He was fed up and decided to use 1% of his magic to show them what they would face if they spoke about it again. The thieves were terrified to the core and immediately decided to flee the scene without a second thought. Lucial's next task was to find the thieves' hideout. However, when he smelled the discarded clothes, he felt extremely uncomfortable. But that was enough to make him overjoyed. And in just a few minutes, he arrived at the location where two guards were dozing off in front of the cave entrance. Lucial decided to use the sonar skills he'd acquired from a bat-like monster to understand the cave's structure. Looking at it, the leader must be at the very back. He began his mission, throwing a branch from the bear's tree to put the guards to sleep. These were sleep-inducing branches, which had no effect on Lucial. It all becomes easy when you repeat this action. Inside the cave, the two robbers were quite easy for him to deal with, but Lucial still intended to assign the search task to Freddy. At that moment, one of the robbers stood up, looking suspicious, and asked about Lucial's identity. Lucial realized that he was the leader. Using his pain-sensing skills, Lucial realized that the only difference between him and Freddy was the cursed knife. The leader attacked first with his sword, but as expected, Lucial easily dodged it. The attacks continued from him, and Lucial continued to dodge. However, the blows from the leader made it clear why Freddy had lost. In the midst of the battle, Lucial disappeared, much to the robber's astonishment, and immediately attacked him with a punch. The scene returns to Lucial's hideout, where the adventurers have just awoke from a deep sleep. Lucial was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for them. Freddy also felt that he had fallen into a deep sleep. But even so, Lucial did not reveal his actions. Lucial has now mastered the skills of a robber, which makes it clear that Freddy and his team have a great chance. No one knew what he was planning. Lucial prepared a chicken, and when Freddy asked about his plans, he cut short the conversation, saying he was just preparing breakfast. The adventurers sensed something was wrong. Lucial tried to ease everyone's anxieties, and together with Alma, he decided to prepare a delicious meal for them. The process of making fried chicken resumed, with Lucial carefully cutting the meat into appropriately sized pieces. Then, use eggs to marinate the meat by whisking the eggs over the chicken. He performed each step of the process with great skill, earning constant praise from Freddy. Just then, someone rushed up and wished him a good morning. That person was Mildy. She ran straight to Lucial and hugged him, as if feeling the energy of a newborn child. This hug is to thank Lucial for helping her. both with medicine and hospitality. Mildy then introduced herself as a member of the Golden Fox clan, who typically hide their tails. Because Lucial saved her life, Mildy agreed to show him the softest tail she could see in Manga. Lucial was very attracted to that tail, but Litra immediately woke up and pulled Lucial towards her, making him feel comfortable in her embrace. The two girls started arguing about who Lucial belonged to, while Lucial could only blush like a tomato, caught between two beautiful girls. Lucial deceived both of them and continued preparing the breakfast she had started. He continued with the steps for making fried chicken, including shaping the chicken into patties and stir-frying the vegetables in a pan. Finally, the chicken and vegetable patty is sandwiched between two slices of bread, creating a delicious chicken fillet sandwich. Everyone was very pleased, but Mildy was the first to run over and take the first bite. She ate happily. One bite was enough to satisfy her. Then, without much thought, she pushed a piece into Litra's mouth. At first, Litra found it difficult, but after experiencing the heavenly taste, she immediately relaxed and asked about the type of bird meat used in the sandwich. Lucial was unwilling to reveal the name of the bird, but Mildy enthusiastically helped him answer that question. In fact, he had eaten the meat of a monster. Named the Hell Bird, this ghostly creature has the ability to enhance fire resistance, which is very useful when facing fire magic swords. Although guests don't really like it when the host doesn't eat breakfast. But Mildy pulled Lucial aside while giving him the sandwich. Even though Lucial had tried this dish thousands of times, each time he ate it, it brought him a new experience. This feeling became even more pronounced when he took the first bite, and he felt like he was in heaven. The guests were waiting for praise, and Lucial didn't disappoint, his eyes welling up with tears as he said the food was truly delicious. Those tears weren't because the sandwich was delicious, but because of the happiness of finally being able to share a meal with everyone after so long. Breakfast was over, and the adventurers prepared to set off on their mission, thanking Lucial for everything he had done for them. This sense of peace was quickly shattered when the girls came to say goodbye to Lucial, whom they considered a dear friend. The group leader felt perplexed, as Lucial knew they wouldn't be able to take a child like him along on this difficult mission. However, each person in the group thanked him in turn. Litra hugged him, Garner thanked him for the food, and Freddie took the time to thank him for everything he had done, and said that if they met again, Freddie would introduce Lucial to his lord as a great benefactor of Night Lativia. Lucial arranged everything, then saw them off with best wishes. However, he wasn't really happy to see them off because all of these people were wonderful individuals, those whom Lucial did not want to see die. The scene shifts, and the adventurous knights have arrived at the bandits' hideout. Here, there was a lack of camp and no thick bushes like they had encountered when approaching the area. Suddenly, Lucial appeared there, hidden beneath a fur cloak. He was the one who had orchestrated the entire ambush. He was wearing a gecko skin, a magical item that could camouflage and conceal the user's presence. Freddie asked the team members if they were ready for the mission, and they all agreed. Freddie then asked Litra to use her magic, and she summons the sleeping serpent, a nocturnal serpent species which puts the enemy into a deep sleep. The first attack was successful, and the group immediately launched an assault. However, surprisingly, the surrounding area was very quiet, with no noise at all. Mildy sensed something was amiss and immediately called his captain. In fact, all the robbers were still fast asleep in their beds. This was unbelievable for adventurous knights like them, but they eventually accepted it and decided to move forward. Lucial took a step forward and, to help Freddie's group, used Windslicer to cut through the rocks at the top of the entrance. He partially blocked the cave entrance. Finally, he did it with a smile, thinking the robbers wouldn't be able to escape. However, Freddie's group immediately went on guard upon hearing the sound, worried that the noise would wake their enemies. But even after some time had passed, none of the robbers woke up. However, this thought gave Freddie an idea. If they blocked off all the rooms, as they had done with the first one, then no one would be able to escape. Garnet takes on the task, using her brute strength to block off the remaining rooms. The group then went inside, and Freddy also realized that the only thing left was to confront the bandit leader and his magic sword. As expected, they finally encountered him, heavily bandaged, who asked how they had all managed to get there. Freddy stood up and proactively stated that he would confront him alone. The leader recognized them immediately and began to mock them, asking if they wanted to taste defeat. Freddy mocked him again about the bandages on his body, which made him lose his temper. The leader launched the first attack with his magic sword, but Freddy managed to defend himself with his ordinary sword. The two swords clashed, creating sharp, resonant sounds like two swordsmen engaged in battle. Freddy and Lushel's teammates cheered him on throughout the match. Throughout this normal battle, Freddy was the dominant one. The bandit leader, despite his magic sword, was constantly being pushed back. In reality, his swordsmanship was merely amateurish. There was nothing special about him, while Freddy was highly trained, always anticipating things 2 or 3 steps ahead and possessing sharp swordsmanship. That difference was the reason he was repelled. The bandit leader, seeing the situation was unfavorable, called for backup from the other bandits, but a profound silence prevailed. Freddy took the opportunity to announce that all of his subordinates were fast asleep. The leader could not believe it. Lushel, at this moment, remembered that he had not yet retrieved the sleeping bushes, which had caused the bandits to lose consciousness and fall asleep. The question is, how did Freddy's crew stay awake while all the robbers were fast asleep? The answer is, Lushel had accidentally put hay in the sandwich he had prepared. Finally, the attack everyone had been waiting for arrived when the bandit leader wielded his fiery magic sword, aiming to turn his opponents into ashes. The members of the group began to worry as they witnessed this ferocious assault. Without hesitation, Freddy charged straight into the flames, prompting the robber to call him an idiot. Surprisingly, however, Freddy emerged from the fire completely unharmed. Immediately afterward, he attacked the robber decisively, ending his life with a single blow. Everyone on the team asked Freddy if he was hurt. Freddy was still surprised that he was unharmed and turned to Lushel, smiling and relieved that he no longer had to worry about the food. But his thoughts were immediately interrupted when Mildy called him the guardian angel of victory. And every member of the team thanked him for saving their lives. At that moment, Lushel felt tears welling up in his eyes, and he bowed his head before them as a sign of respect. Finally, they all returned to their castle. Just 3 days later, Freddy returned to Lushel, bringing the good news that their mission had been a success. He also invited Lushel to meet an important person. Lushel agreed and followed Freddy, wondering about the man's identity. Upon arrival, all the team members were waiting. A quarrel was about to erupt between Mildy and Litra. But Freddy quickly intervened, reminding everyone of their mission. Suddenly, all the team members knelt down. An old man, accompanied by a horseman and a young boy, stepped out of the carriage. These people kept staring at Lushel, making him wonder what their identities were. The old man lifted Lushel into the air and began to laugh loudly. The knight accompanying him introduced the old man as Lord Clavis Grand Lativia, head of the Lativia family. The man was Kareem, a very cheerful person, and Lushel wondered why he was there. Mr. Clavis introduced himself once again, asserting that he was the head of the Lativia family. Then he bowed his head and thanked Lushel for what he had done for the night. Clavis knew Freddy well. He was a man with a strong sense of responsibility, always putting the knight's life and death first. Finally, he knelt down again, showing utmost respect, and thanked Lushel as a little hero. Furthermore, Clavis suggested that Lushel could ask for anything he wanted as a reward for his services. However, Lushel was unwilling to accept that, but that wasn't the only reason Clavis wanted to reward Lushel. He had heard that Lushel had been abandoned by her parents and survived alone in the mountains. Lushel was shocked to hear this, and Freddy apologized for revealing this information. Clavis was incredibly impressed with Lushel, that he could remain calm and not ask for any reward despite having performed such a great deed. Clavis then decided to suggest that Lushel return to Lativia's house. This was a very unexpected proposal and left Lushel perplexed. The reason was that Lativia was a ducal family, and the aristocratic system had remained unchanged for 300 years, making them the most noble family. But the crucial question is, why would Clavis want to invite Lushel back to the family? The real reason Clavis did this was that he wanted Lushel to help his family, especially with his potion-making skills. These blunt words astonished Lushel, and he began to wonder if they knew his secret. In fact, Lushel employed several unique methods to support the group of adventurers. The first time was when he helped Mildy recover from an injury. The second time was when he helped Litra restore her magical powers. The third time, he enhanced the group's fire resistance with a special sandwich. Everything he did seemed natural, unnoticed by anyone, but it appeared the Lativia family had discovered something. Lushel immediately asked why Clavis knew he was a pharmacist. At this point, Karim Lativia was the one who spoke up to explain. He recounted that when analyzing the candy Lushel gave to the knights using magical appraisal, he discovered it had the effect of relieving pain and healing minor wounds simultaneously. This was extremely rare. When the royal pharmacists of the Lativia family consulted ancient medical texts, they found no records of such formulas. Furthermore, thanks to that special sandwich, all of the knights of Lativia gained fire resistance. This led them to suspect that all the medicines Lushel gave to the knights were rare pharmaceuticals, proving that he possessed exceptional medical knowledge. With 300 years of experience, Lushel quickly realized that Karim was being very cautious when speaking. He understood that, if necessary, they could turn against him and use force to control him. But that's precisely what makes Clavis different. All signs now pointed to Lushel trusting them, so he asked everyone to wait a little while. After a while, Lushel returned, carrying a slime. He placed the slime on the floor and told them to focus on a little magic trick. The most curious person was the little girl who was with Clavis. Before starting, Lushel explained about the magic stone inside the slime's core. He said that when the outer shell of an organism is damaged, its core will break and it will immediately disappear. The magic trick began. Lushel cut off a part of the slime's body, but it didn't disappear. All the adventurers were astonished and eagerly asked how this could have happened. He explained that just a little more damage to the outer shell would cause the magic stone inside to fall out, making the slime's body disappear. However, the severed portion remains intact. This is because the mana channels between the outer shell and the core transport mana throughout the body. When these mana channels are severed, they send a self-destruct signal to the outer shell. But as long as the mana flow isn't interrupted, the slime survives without losing its magic stone. The detached shell also remains intact. Clavis suddenly realized that this was how the other parts of the slime could be separated without it disappearing. The adventurers began to shudder as they understood the truth. At that moment, Lushel revealed that the candy they were eating was actually made of slime. Seeing everyone getting even more frightened, he immediately ate a piece in front of them to prove there was nothing to be afraid of. At this point, Clavis stepped forward, praising Lushel for his extraordinary knowledge. Lushel discovered something previously unknown to the world, astonishing everyone, but no one could blame him. Despite his exceptional intelligence, Lushel was still just a child. He wondered if things might have been different if his father had ever praised him even once. The atmosphere became emotional. It seemed everyone was in tears, from the adventurers to the entire Clavis family. Lushel apologized for keeping all these secrets, but Clavis reassured him, revealing that he and Karim already knew his candy was made of slime. Everyone was astonished to hear that. Clavis went on to explain that the Lativia family had a tradition of academic research. He himself was also a researcher on monster ecology, in addition to his responsibilities as head of the family. However, Clavis still had a question, because the power Lushel gave the group couldn't possibly come solely from slime. Lushel knew there was no need to hide it anymore, so he frankly revealed that the secret lay in the meat of the Hellfire bird. It was a monster born from a volcano, and it was its unique characteristics that gave the group resistance to fire. Finally, Clavis, curious, turned to Freddy and asked if he would reveal the gang's secret to Lushel. Freddie became suspicious and turned back to ask Lushel why he had given them those powers without any knowledge of them. Things gradually became tense. Freddie kept questioning, but Lushel remained silent. It was as if it had been too long since he wanted to speak up. Kareem stepped forward and asked permission to use his appraisal skills. Upon activating it, he discovered countless powerful skills within Lushel, too many to count or even fully comprehend. Without reading further, Kareem asserted that Lushel was the strongest person here. Clavis realized that Lushel was still hiding something, but this time, the boy was clearly trembling. He didn't want to lie to them, and eventually confessed that he had actually been living for the past 300 years. All the secrets were now revealed, and the listeners were stunned. It was hard to believe that an 8-year-old child had lived alone in the mountains for 300 years. Mildy chuckled as he looked at the boy, thinking about his own age. But Kareem confirmed that everything he said was true. The final card regarding his immortality was revealed. This completely shocked the group members, who were surprised that it was actually achievable. He was stressed, didn't know what to do, and all he could think about was running away. However, Freddie stopped him, while Clavis reassured him, saying that they still wanted to invite him back to the family, regardless of the truth. Clavis revealed that he initially intended to send Lushel to an orphanage. But Freddie objected and insisted on taking him home as family. He wanted to help him reclaim what he had lost during his 300 years of solitude. Lushel was surprised to learn that Freddie had always been on her side. But this time, even Clavis wanted to adopt him. The old gentleman extended his hand, inviting the young man back to the villa. Lushel hesitated, then tormented himself, admitting that he had devoured countless monsters and survived using extraordinary skills. Those things are nothing short of a real monster. Everyone looked at Lushel with worried eyes. But no one knew that Clavis had started laughing loudly, startling Lushel with his words. The reason is, even though he ate all of that and could be considered a monster, but after meeting him, Clavis realized that he still had a childlike heart inside him. Lushel was also aware that no matter how strong his body was, his mentality is still that of an 8-year-old child. The little girl kept looking at him with a skeptical expression. And Clavis explained that he harbored no ill feelings, as he needed Lushel's help to survive. He extended his hand again, inviting him to join him. And Lushel began to worry about Alma's future, because if he leaves, Alma will be alone on the mountain again. Just then, Alma emerged from the bushes, and Lushel stood before Alma to protect him. Lushel stopped and told them that Alma was completely harmless. Lushel knelt down to try and calm the situation, emphasizing that he would not leave as promised. But Alma surprised him by saying that she had come to ask him to leave. Lushel confirmed those words, and Alma did as he said without hesitation. Alma tried to show that he didn't care about Lushel's presence, but all the other travelers were surprised because they understood the meaning of his words. Lushel refused, and Clavis found the monster quite interesting. He was ready to accept anything, for nothing surprised him anymore. Before Lushel could say anything more, Alma told him that he would return to the plains with them. Lushel disagreed, and Alma said that he wanted to live freely from now on, and if he returned, it would be a burden lifted from his shoulders. Even Mildy didn't like it, so Lushel must have felt the same way. However, when Alma's ear twitched, Lushel realized that Alma had lied. Alma then said that he knew perfectly well that if he showed even the slightest bit of concern, Lushel wouldn't leave. He wanted his companion to live freely, to leave this mountain and integrate with the outside world. That noble thought was enough to bring tears to the girl's eyes. So, once again, he begged Lushel to return with everyone. However, Lushel remained stubborn, insisting that Alma accompany them. But Alma refused, saying that rumors could ruin his life. Lushel feared that he would once again be alone. But Alma pointed to some of the other trolls and said that he already had something he wanted to protect his whole life. Alma tried her best to comfort her friend, encouraging him to move on. After a long period of thought, Lushel finally gave a thumbs up in agreement. He thanked Alma first, then returned to his hiding place to retrieve what was most important to him. When he returned to the group, he expressed his agreement to go with them. Finally, the shy little girl introduced herself as Leila Lativia. To confirm this, Lucial also introduced himself as one of the Tristans, saying that he was being cared for by them. Everyone was completely stunned by that statement. When they realized that Lucial was actually one of the Tristans, everyone was astonished. Freddie worried that his master would abandon him again. However, Clavis reassured him that it wouldn't happen. Another reason is that Lucial himself was once a victim of cruelty from his own father. Finally, Clavis invited Lucial into his caravan because he wanted to tell him about the 300 years he had survived. As the convoy rolled along, the story began. It goes back about 300 years. When a minor conflict between nations erupts, it ignites a war that spreads like wildfire. The story continues as that conflict gradually escalates into a catastrophic global war. The war involved humans, beastmen, elves, dwarves, and even demi-humans. A chaotic dance between the races lasted for 30 years. In the endless whirlwind of war, people gradually became exhausted, wounded, and defeated, their numbers dwindling year after year. The demons have launched attacks against humanity. Their presence permeated the world, weaving chaos and confusion among humankind for generations. That all-out war gave the impression that the demons had been waiting for this opportunity all along. In short, humanity's wars are orchestrated by demons. That tiny spark initially set ablaze a series of nations, as if it were a pre-planned scheme. But when the truth was revealed, humanity began to unite and fight against the demons. At that point, the demon's power gradually became ineffective. Lucial was uninterested in anything else, only in asking about the Tristan family, whether they had perished in that war. The truth is, the Holy Swordsman possesses power comparable to that of demons, and that is humanity's only hope. At that moment, Lucial realized that his father might be dead, and if so, the person who could help him must be his older brother. Clavis looked extremely disappointed, but continued telling his story. No matter how powerful a holy swordsman may be, a lone hero cannot change fate. And so, as the days went by, humanity was gradually pushed back by the overwhelming power of the demons. Finally, in the depths of despair, the situation worsened, because humanity's only hope, the Holy Swordsman, betrayed his allegiance and sided with the demon race. Those words sent a chill down Lucial's spine, making him tremble all over. The battle continued, and things only got worse. Following the Holy Swordsman, many others began to desert, joining the demonic side. Finally, the Holy Swordsman established a human kingdom within the demon territory, and his followers settled there, calling it the Kingdom of Tristan. Humanity was completely hopeless. But then, something unexpected happened. With the tremendous strength they still possessed, the remaining people rose up and fought. In an instant, the tide turned. As a result, the demons were driven back to their territory, and the kingdom of Tristan was sealed within a barrier. Legend says that Tristan's followers continued to enslave humans. Lucial now understood why everyone was so shocked and felt so guilty. Clavis stepped forward and urged him to cast aside his guilt by erasing the name Tristan from his identity. The reason wasn't just emotional, but also because there was a possibility his powers could be exploited by the demon race. Lucial understood that with his power, the demons would certainly do everything in their power to win him over to their side. But he was also certain that if that happened, he would immediately refuse. Rumors spread that the barrier had been broken, and it seemed the demons were planning something else. Not long after, the caravan finally arrived at the Lativia family estate, a huge, glittering mansion. After a long sleep, Lucial woke up on a comfortable bed. Clavis told him he should rest a little. During that time, he left the mansion and set up camp outside, despite living in a magnificent villa. During this time, the hero decided to sacrifice his life if there was any threat to Lativia. Just then, Litra appeared in her maid's uniform, a symbol of the Lativia family. She introduced herself as Litra, his new caregiver. However, Lucial didn't like that very much. Litra then said that his life was now very different from the days he spent in the mountains. She intended to give him the kind of childhood he never had. Things gradually became more peaceful. Litra began searching for a second caregiver. And that was Mildy, who was incredibly intelligent. Mildy offered to help Lucial that evening, but Litra immediately refused. At that moment, they noticed how he set up his tent, and Lucial explained that this was how he drank water every day. He tossed a few beans into the air, then used his wind blade to cut them into fine powder. Then, he filtered the essence from the bean powder through a cotton cloth, and what flowed out was a pure morning drink. All three tried it. However, the girls immediately found it too bitter. Although the aroma was very pleasant, after just one sip, they grimaced because of the bitterness. Seeing this, Lucial added more sugar and give them another try. This time, their reaction was exactly the same as when they tasted other dishes he had made: astonishment and delight. The drink was made from kohi beans, and Litra was stunned to hear that. Kohi seeds are an extremely rare magical herb. Just eating one seed will significantly increase magical power, like precious gems. For Lucial, this was perfectly normal, as he drank this type of water every day. As a result, his magical power reached its maximum level. But what hurt the girls even more was when Lucial threw the remaining bean pulp into the garden. Next, he intended to incinerate them with magic. Both girls were speechless, completely at a loss for words. Finally, they frantically told him that these seeds were extremely rare. Lucial didn't think so. He dumped an entire bottomless bag of kohai seeds right in front of them. The two girls were shocked again, while Lucial still didn't realize what terrible thing she had just done. At that moment, they heard Leila's scream for help. They all rushed over immediately. When they arrived, they discovered it was too late. Leila nearly fell, but was fortunately rescued in time by Lord Venson. Immediately afterward, he ordered the maids to act, and they quickly complied. Venson introduced himself as the head butler, then left Leila with Lucial, asking him to look after her during this time. Lucial anxiously inquired about her condition, but at that moment, they heard a loud scream coming from inside the mansion. Everyone was confused and didn't understand what was happening. Leila explained that her mother had suffered from this disease for a long time, and each time it flared up, she endured excruciating pain. Lucial immediately stepped forward and decided to help right there and then. When they entered Leila's mother's room, the scene that unfolded before them was a group of butlers and maids trying to treat her. Venson requested the use of healing magic, and Litra quickly took on the task. However, her healing methods didn't have much effect. Lucial immediately stepped forward to help Litra. But the magic he used wasn't ordinary healing, but angelic prayer, a high-level form of magic. The lady's pain gradually subsided. Just then, Lucial called Lady Leila in. She leaped out from under the covers and ran straight to her mother without hesitation. Then, unexpectedly, she began performing CPR. Everyone stood frozen, completely stunned. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Suddenly, Leila's mother woke up and recognized her daughter. The whole family was shocked and didn't know what to say. Leila's mother, Sophie, felt guilty for causing everyone so much worry. However, Karim noticed what Leila had actually done. He turned to Lucial, and he offered her a slime candy he had prepared. Sophie shuddered at the mention of it. But Lucial went on to explain that this very medicine had helped cure him many years ago. The most shocked person was Clavis, because this was exactly what he had asked Lucial to do. Without beating around the bush, Clavis stated frankly that he genuinely wanted Lucial to treat his wife. He revealed that the family had tried everything to find a cure, but everything was resolved in the blink of an eye. Clavis then offered Lucial anything as a thank you. However, Lucial refused, saying that the slime candy was only a temporary measure to relieve the pain, and that Lady Sophie's illness was not yet completely cured. Clavis was stunned when he heard that, and Lady Sophie also confirmed that she still felt a slight pain in her stomach. The atmosphere in the room became tense again. Lushel announced that he would personally check on Sophie's condition. Clavis said that conventional appraisals wouldn't work, but Lushel didn't intend to use appraisal. Instead, he would use his Dragon Eye skill. As soon as he activated this skill, everything became clear to him. Initially, the information he gathered was similar to an assessment, but in the end, Long Han broke through the barrier, helping him see deeper into the nature of the problem. The truth was revealed. Lady Sophie is under a powerful curse, a curse that still has enough force to kill her. More detailed information suggests that a dragon or a dragon-level cursed item was used to create this curse. Lushel confirmed that this was indeed the dragon curse he had once been afflicted with. The problem is that the person who casts the curse cannot reverse it, no matter what. Kareem was horrified to realize that if Lushel had also been cursed in the same way, how could he have escaped? Lushel understood the curse and knew the only way to break it was to eat a dragon. Clavis was devastated, believing it was completely impossible. However, Lushel denied that. He knew that dragons only cared about the strongest, and if he challenged it, the chances of winning are very slim, as the dragon could become enraged and attack him at any moment. Clavis lost all hope and resigned himself to his fate. He refused to let Lushel fight the dragon. Meanwhile, Lady Sophie was pleased to know that thanks to the earlier pill, she had been able to prolong her life until now. Lushel understood that confronting the dragon was the most difficult path. At that moment, Kareem stepped forward, deciding to fight the dragon himself. The first person to strongly object was his father. Kareem directly asked if his father wanted to give up all hope. Did that mean he was just going to sit idly by and wait for his mother to die in front of him? Clavis was unable to answer. Finally, he agreed to let his son go on the mission, entrusting Sophie's life to Kareem. Kareem dared to do it because he held the title of hero, a title second only to Sword Saint. Lushel noticed that Leila was unhappy, and shortly afterward, the little girl ran away. Sophie noticed something was amiss, but Lushel reassured her, saying everything was fine. However, shortly afterward, he also chased after Leila and unexpectedly got lost in a mysterious tunnel. Descending the stairs, a stunning underground garden unfolded before him. A multitude of rare magical plants thrived in the soft light. In the middle of the garden, Leila sat on the ground, her head bowed low, tears silently falling. Lushel didn't pay attention to that immediately. He began observing and identifying the herbs in the garden. All of these plants had been grown by Leila herself to save her mother. But in the end, all his efforts seemed futile. Leila gave a wry smile, praising Lushel's accomplishments. While her brother was risking his life fighting the dragon, the knights were also preparing to set off to provide support. Only she could do nothing. Lushel immediately denied it. He said that the way Leila cared for the garden, maintaining the right temperature, fertilizing properly, had already proven she had done more than enough for her mother. He continued to praise her, saying that at this age, children should be preoccupied with playing. However, she personally cultivated a rare plant, lula grass, an extremely valuable magical herb. Lushel gave Leila a sprig of lula grass, telling her to pray for her mother. Leila silently complied, and Lushel assured her that he would help her make her wish come true. That night, he sneaked into the kitchen. However, as soon as he entered, the chef stopped him, refusing to let him use the ingredients without permission. Not only that, they even tried to push him out. Just then, the head chef appeared. Upon hearing a staff member report a child breaking into the kitchen, he stepped forward and introduced himself. Sanho, the head chef of the Lativia family. Lushel immediately spoke up, asking permission to use the kitchen, but Shano firmly refused. He gave 2 reasons. First, he couldn't let someone with questionable skills cook indiscriminately, and second, Lushel was a guest and couldn't just arbitrarily enter the kitchen to cook for others. Lushel lost his patience. He loudly insisted that he wasn't causing any trouble. At that moment, Leila arrived as well. She stepped forward, earnestly pleading with the head chef. The head chef could not disobey her. Then, unexpectedly, they agreed to let Lushel use the kitchen, but only because of Leila. She was the sole reason he accepted this. He asked him what he intended to cook. Upon hearing that Kareem and the others were about to enter battle with the dragon, Lushel wanted to prepare a special dish to celebrate their victory. Nevertheless, the head chef remained cautious. He stated that he would taste the dish first, and only if it met his standards would it be served. Lushel agreed immediately. Soon after, he was provided with all the necessary tools. When he touched them, his eyes lit up. These were real cooking tools. Immediately, he plunged into his work, his hands moving as fast as a machine. The knife slashed down the cutting board with incredible speed, the sharp sound echoing continuously. Both the staff and the head chef were stunned, curious to know what dish he intended to make with all those ingredients. He began by following the steps, preparing the ingredients, heating the oil, waiting for the aroma to rise, then adding the pre-prepared vegetables. Finally, he added salt, butter, and grated cheese. The dish is complete. The final product, pork, cheese, and beans. It appeared before everyone's eyes so beautiful that no one could believe it had been cooked by a child. As promised, Lushel served the first meal to the head chef. Shano picked up the spoon and took the first bite. Not a trace of expression. The chef didn't stop there. He called a few more employees over to taste it. As soon as the flavor spread across their tongues, their expressions changed instantly. Their astonishment turned into admiration, and finally into effusive praise. This dish, it's unbelievably perfect. They wondered what made the flavor so exquisite. The head chef was the first to realize. Crushed, dried vegetables. Lushel confirmed it. After a long silence, the chef's expression finally changed. He stared at Lushel, then said, "Genius." The entire kitchen was in an uproar. Not only had the chef accepted the dish, but he had also allowed everyone to enjoy it. Lushel chuckled softly. He also offered praise to the chef for the position he held. Pork and beans has been a familiar dish since ancient times, but the war against evil spirits devastated this culture. Amidst the turmoil, countless traditional recipes disappeared. The head chef bowed his head, thanking Lushel for bringing her flavors back to them. Lushel felt a warmth spreading through his heart. He was genuinely happy that he had made this dish. At that moment, Leila stepped forward, her eyes eager to taste it. Initially, the head chef shook his head in refusal, but then agreed, saying that it was a secret between them. Leila was so delighted she couldn't hide her smile. Lushel offered her the meal, just one bite, and she was instantly captivated by the flavor. The chef knew from the start that this dish would surely please everyone. Lushel later revealed that he would be preparing another dish later in the day. That evening, a party was held at the mansion, marking the farewell to the warriors as they set off for battle. The party began, and Clavis joined in the lively atmosphere. Lushel stepped forward, declaring that he had prepared a dish to guarantee victory and asked everyone to enjoy it. The first dish was pork with cheese and beans, which had been left over from before. Clavis took the first bite and was immediately pleased with its taste. Litra curiously asked if there was anything special about the dish, and the answer was gonkyo beans, a rare type of bean with the ability to boost physical strength. But given Lushel's culinary skills, this was not surprising. Without keeping them waiting any longer, Lushel proceeded to bring out the second dish. Everyone was curious to know what it was. Lushel immediately objected, because it was a dangerous thing. However, he didn't mean to say it was poisonous or harmful in any way. Freddie ignored all warnings and nonchalantly tasted it. Everyone in the room was astonished to see that he not only had no problems, he even praised the food as extremely delicious. Freddie immediately demanded an explanation for the dangerous word the chef had mentioned. Others tried the dish, and everyone was captivated by its flavor. The party quickly descended into delight. One piece wasn't enough. Everyone continued eating a second piece, then a third, and the cycle continued. In the midst of all this, Kareem suddenly noticed something unusual. He shouted, telling everyone to stop. Lushel calmly revealed the real reason why this dish was so dangerous. It was too delicious. So delicious that once you started, no one could stop. Everyone looked at each other and nodded in unison. No one could stop. And then they all wondered, what exactly was this dish? Finally, Lushel revealed that the mysterious dish was crispy fried dragon butterfly, a giant insect belonging to the group of the largest insect monsters. Its flesh has a texture similar to fish, but as soon as he said that, he realized nobody was really listening. Everyone continued eating until the plates were empty, and the party officially ended just like that. Scene changes. Lushel is pleased to see everyone enjoying the meal. However, he was surprised to find Freddy still practicing, even though it was late at night. His sword strokes were sharp, but there were still some flaws. Clearly, he was pouring all his determination into this. At that moment, Litra appeared and called Freddy. He couldn't sleep, for fear of being rendered useless in battle. Litra wasn't worried at all. She trusted Lushel's cooking skills, believing they would give them strength. But Freddy remained stubborn. He swore to protect Lord Kareem at all costs, even if it meant acting as a human shield. Richel knew perfectly well that this wasn't the right way to do it. Freddy knew he wasn't strong enough, but no matter what, the only way he could help in the battle was by becoming a shield for Kareem. Litra couldn't take it anymore. She yelled that Lushel had never cooked in a way that would make someone risk their life. Then she angrily stormed off. Before leaving, she added, "Freddy doesn't even realize how many people would suffer if he died." Lushel witnessed it all from behind the wall. Enraged, he nearly destroyed the wall with his own strength, but at that moment, Cletus appeared from behind, stopping him. Lushel was worried. He feared that his own dish had caused this argument, but Clavis denied this. He said that Freddy had such a strong sense of responsibility that he disregarded his own life. Clavis knew perfectly well. Freddy felt pressure from him, and not wanting to see him walk down a path to his death, Clavis reassured Lushel, assuring him that everything would be all right. All the knights were ready to set off. Clavis stood at the forefront, assuming the commanding position, and declared loudly, "They will fight the dragon!" He then went on to motivate them, emphasizing their courage and loyalty before the upcoming battle. Freddy stepped forward, kneel before Clavis. Clavis gave him the holy sword Flametan. Everyone was astonished, but Freddy accepted the honor. They also vowed to break the curse, even if it meant sacrificing their own lives. Clavis was not pleased with those words. He insisted that lending the sword meant Freddy had to return it himself. It was a psychological trap, and Freddy fell for it. Sophie also expressed her gratitude to all those who went to war and asked them to promise to return safely. Clavis understood that none of them could refuse this promise. Freddy realized that and solemnly vowed that he would return after the battle. Finally, Clavis gave his last command, boosting the morale of all the knights before they went into battle. Lushel was also present. All preparations were complete. Kareem ordered everyone to head towards Longshan, where the dragon was waiting. After a long journey, they finally arrived at Longsun. Before the battle, the army decided to set up camp and rest to recover their strength. The campfire blazed, and each knight lay down on the ground, preparing for the life or death battle ahead. Kareem remained pensive about his sister, the person who gave him medicine to fight, along with a Lulala leaf as a lucky charm. The night passed. The next morning, Freddy opened the map that Lushel had prepared. Following the instructions, they opened it right up on the mountain. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared. Lushel. He's not actually here. He sealed himself into the map. Even more amazing, Lushel can talk to people. He created a copy of his own memories and personality to help them deal with the dragon. Lushel's doppelganger appeared self-satisfied, constantly praising himself, which led many to find him somewhat frivolous. Lushel led the way, and the knights followed him without hesitation. Before long, they had climbed the cliff face of the mountain. There, they finally encountered the dragon, a gigantic white dragon, sleeping peacefully. Lushel's role ends here. Before disappearing, he left a warning, never mention his name before the dragon. Mildy stepped forward, observed the dragon, and then informed Kareem that it was still fast asleep. They began discussing their course of action. But the discussion quickly turned into a heated debate. The noise woke the dragon. In its anger, it roared, asking who had trespassed on its territory. Initially, it was confused, but when it realized this group had come on a mission, Kareem stepped forward. He declared that they had come to ask the dragon to break the curse. Immediately, both sides assumed defensive stances, gripped their weapons tightly, and declared they were ready for battle. Before long, all the knights and soldiers under Karim's command had formed battle formations on the battlefield. The dragon accepted, showing respect for their determination, and the battle immediately began. Each member of the team performed their task with the highest priority. The dragon gathered energy, preparing to unleash its breath of fire. Garner quickly realized this and ordered the team to form a defensive formation. As soon as the shield barrier was erected, a massive stream of fire erupted from the dragon, creating terrifying pressure. It was convinced that the flimsy shield could not withstand its attack. Meanwhile, Freddy sneaked up behind them, attempting a sneak attack. But it couldn't even inflict a scratch. The dragon turned to chat with Freddy, inadvertently revealing a weakness. The army, seizing the opportunity from the rear, launched a surprise attack. When it turned around, the dragon realized that all the soldiers were still alive after its breath of fire. Litra ordered a second all-out attack. Ropes were thrown directly at the dragon. Mildy and the knights quickly climbed onto its back. The white dragon became enraged, thrashing violently and tearing through all the ropes. But it was too late. The soldiers had already managed to cling to its body. Immediately afterward, the entire army suddenly jumped down. The dragon was confused, not understanding what was happening. But when it looked at its body, it realized with horror. Explosives had been planted all over it. The bombs exploded, causing a series of consecutive explosions. Karim immediately cast a wind spell, helping his teammates land safely. Mildy believed the dragon couldn't withstand it. However, she was wrong. From within the cloud of dust and smoke, the dragon emerged, completely unharmed. It decided to show them the true horror of a divine dragon. The enormous tail swept across, sending numerous knights flying. Immediately afterward, a terrifying surge of dragon breath erupted, engulfing the battlefield in a sea of fire. Litra tried to hold on, using one of Lucial's skills to defend herself. The dragon was truly impressed by their resilience, still standing firm despite enduring countless dragon breath attacks. It seemed to be getting more serious, starting to send knights flying in all directions. Litra was also caught in the attack. Just as she was about to fall, Freddy rushed forward and caught her midair. He understood perfectly well that they still needed Litra for their magical defense. Without hesitation, Freddy immediately charged into battle, launching his first attack on the dragon. However, the attack had no effect. At this moment, Karim charged in, unleashing another attack. This time, the dragon finally suffered some damage. The dragon's deafening roar proved the attack had been effective. They needed someone to create a distraction so they could find an opportunity to attack. Freddy didn't hesitate and immediately volunteered to be the decoy. Meanwhile, Karim began praying for increased strength. Freddy was determined to keep hacking at the dragon until he was completely exhausted. But that wasn't a good strategy, because the dragon quickly counterattacked, sweeping its enormous tail straight at him. Freddy and the dragon were too close, and the dragon was gathering energy to unleash another dragon breath attack. At that very moment, a sharp blade of wind shot forth, striking the dragon's head directly from the left. This proves that the hero has completed his pact with the element of wind. He is hovering in midair, preparing to unleash his next strike. The two most powerful entities on the battlefield face each other. The battle between Karim and the dragon was fierce. Both continuously unleashed powerful attacks. Karim poured all his strength into each slash, determined to defeat the monster. The dragon, undeterred, unleashed its dragon's breath to finish off its enemy, but the hero swiftly dodged with keen instincts. This is a battle between the strongest, and therefore no one dares to interfere. Everyone is waiting to see who will be the winner in this test of endurance. Freddy ordered everyone to continue the attack, and immediately, the knights deployed their tactics. Archers fired arrows, mages cast spells, and warriors used physical strength to overwhelm their opponents. The battle dragged on, and gradually, all of Lavicia's knights began to tire. Ultimately, Karim found himself at a disadvantage, while the dragon remained standing firmly in front of him. The dragon was impressed by Karim's perseverance, but it was also injured and exhausted. but it was still determined to end it all right now. The dragon swung its enormous claws, aiming straight at Karim, but the hero once again dodged just in time. Karim stepped back, calling out the name of the goddess of wind, imploring her ultimate power. From the dragon's perspective, the scene was nothing but a futile effort. Nothing happened immediately, and the dragon began to breathe a sigh of relief, believing that its enemy had completely exhausted its strength. But that was only part of his plan. Just then, Freddy suddenly appeared from behind, his hand gripping his sword tightly, determined to pour all their strength into the final attack. The dragon was almost unfazed by the blow, but its eyes suddenly flashed with anxiety when it detected something unusual. Freddy's sword was slowly changing, its color shifting instantly. His teammates around him realized this and burst into joyful cheers, announcing that the sword had finally answered its summons. Freddy noticed this too. With a triumphant shout, he swung his sword, delivering the finishing blow to the dragon. The strike was perfectly executed, and as the blade made contact, the dragon roared in agony. For the first time, the giant dragon collapsed, and all the knights standing around were completely stunned by the sight. It seems they have won. The dragon lay motionless on the ground, and it was only after a while that they truly realized the truth. They had done it. They had defeated the dragon. Freddy was the most exhausted of all. But at that moment, a voice rang out from within the sword. It told him that it had now been purified, thanks to his pure heart. Previously, many had tried to use it, but due to their lack of unwavering resolve, they had received nothing in return. Freddy bowed his head in gratitude to Lushel for the meal he had prepared before the battle. Then, the sword also fell silent, as if it had completed its task after praising the hero of the battle. The knights around him shouted Freddy's name, quickly surrounding him and celebrating the extraordinary feat he had just accomplished. No one could have predicted this would happen. However, at a moment when no one expected it, the dragon suddenly propped itself up on its feet and in a deep, resonant voice, called them noisy creatures. The troops immediately became alert, wondering how the dragon was still able to move. But the dragon had no intention of continuing the fight. It accepted defeat. And as a firm affirmation, it reminded everyone that dragons never lie. If it truly wanted to destroy them, it would have been incredibly easy. And to prove its power, it would have instantly healed itself with divine energy. All the wounds and scratches disappeared, and its body began to glow, signifying complete recovery. Karim and the entire army were stunned by the sight. Mildy, with his curious nature, approached the dragon's tail and discovered that there was still an unhealed wound. This caused the dragon to feel its pride wounded, and it eventually revealed that the injury was inflicted by an enemy from a long time ago. Its words reminded all the knights of a mysterious man from the past. And at that very moment, rage flared in the dragon's eyes just thinking about that person. The dragon ignored the conversation and told them to rest, especially Freddy. However, Freddy refused the offer, but shortly afterward, he suddenly collapsed from pain. The pain was only the beginning. At the same time, the map containing Lushel suddenly appeared, floating in midair. The image of Lushel on the map immediately began to speak incessantly, completely oblivious to the surrounding situation. But the moment it turned to look at the dragon, both of them immediately screamed in astonishment. Lushel immediately hid inside the leaf, too frightened to show his face. Meanwhile, the knights tried to distract the dragon so that it wouldn't think too much about Lushel's presence. However, the white dragon quickly realized that it was Lushel who had led them there. Freddy immediately admitted it without a moment's hesitation. The atmosphere suddenly changed once again when the dragon showed no intention of letting them go because they were Lushel's comrades. The knights quickly reminded the dragon of its promise that it could not turn its back on fair judgment. The white dragon pondered for a moment, then declared that it was willing to stake its position within the dragon clan to complete this mission. Then it ordered everyone to prepare for battle once again. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed once again. From somewhere, a melody emerged, both powerful and soothing. Even the dragon was confused, not understanding where the sound was coming from. Everyone searched together for the source of the sound. And finally, all eyes turned to Karim. He was holding the blade of grass his sister had given him. The dragon also seemed interested in it. But before anything could be done, the scene suddenly shifted back to the mansion. There, Leila was tending to Lulala's plants. She prayed for the safety of the knights and her brother, hoping they could overcome the arduous challenge. Unexpectedly, Lucial appeared, praising her for her dedication to magical herbs. Nevertheless, Lucial understood that Lady Leila was still very worried, as today was the third day since the group had left this place. At that very moment, Lucial sensed an aura of majesty descending from above. He quickly grabbed the young lady, and immediately afterward, the divine dragon appeared before them. The people in the mansion immediately ran to the scene, and Clevis quickly rushed forward to protect them. None of them knew that the entire expedition team was still aboard the dragon. Karim apologized for causing the commotion and announced that the injured had arrived here along with the dragon. The dragon saw it as a service, but Lucial wasn't easily convinced. Immediately afterward, the dragon spoke, calling out Lucial's name, but then asked about the person who had been tending to the Lulala plants. Leila was initially a little scared, but then she mustered up the determination to step forward. Lucial stood in front of her, declaring he would protect her if anything happened. Sensing the tension, the dragon reassured them that it had no intention of harming anyone, only wanting to ask a question. It asked Leila about how she had been taking care of the Lulala grass. Leila replied that she uses soil from the well, dries it in the sun, and replaces the soil once a year. Additionally, she heard that singing could help plants grow well, so she sang to them 2 to 3 times a day in the cellar. The dragon continued to ask, "Why did you put in so much effort?" Leila replied that she wanted to fulfill her wish with the leaf, that everyone would return safely after the ordeal, and that her mother's curse would be broken. Everyone present listened to her heartfelt confession with open hearts. Ultimately, the dragon shattered her mistaken belief that Lulala grass possessed the power to bestow blessings. In fact, this type of grass only reacts to the emotions that humans project onto it. Therefore, when the leaf unfolded, the dragon sensed the absolute sincerity in her prayer. And because dragons always cherish pure emotions, it was moved by the innocent will of the little girl. The dragon declared before everyone that, in order to fulfill the little girl's wish, he would break her mother's curse. It was a divine spell, and that's why the Lulala plants began to bloom. Finally, the blades of grass burst open completely, emitting a light so brilliant it blinded the vision of everyone present. The beam of light shot straight up into the sky, and in that instant, the dragon summoned its power, commanding the curse to begin to be lifted. The light changed trajectory, then shot straight into Sophie's heart. She was about to collapse, but Clavis caught her just in time. Everyone was panicking and worried about her condition, but then Sophie suddenly realized something. She unexpectedly announced that the pain in her chest had completely disappeared. This is the most conclusive evidence proving that the dragon curse has finally been broken. In front of everyone, the couple embraced each other in overwhelming joy. Leila rushed to her parents, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. Karim and the others also stepped forward and knelt down with the knights to offer their congratulations. However, Clavis didn't like the formality, and at that moment, Sophie called Karim over. The whole family hugged each other tightly, savoring the happiest moment of their lives. The sight caught Lucial's eye, causing him to smile with satisfaction. Then he turned to the dragon, expressing his gratitude for bestowing this joy, but the dragon immediately refused to accept thanks from the one who had taken its tail. Hearing this, Clavis decided to step in and resolve the issue between Lucial and the dragon. However, the dragon flatly refused. Clavis persisted, trying to persuade it further. Karim also voiced his support, and other family members wholeheartedly advised him against it. Lucial began to feel confused by everyone's insistence. Finally, the dragon showed lenience, asking them to directly ask Lucial what had happened. Without hesitation, Clavis turned to Lucial. Lucial recounted that it all began about 100 years ago. Back then, he was sitting with the dragon, enjoying a sumptuous meal. Alma was also present at the time, and then, when asked about the food on the table, after a long hesitation, they confessed that it was indeed dragon meat they had intended to serve him. Hearing this, the dragon laughed, then excitedly asked to taste it. Even though it knew it was extremely strange, it was still willing to eat it. It even behaved like a child, eagerly demanding to be served this special dish. Alma witnessed this and jokingly called it a baby dragon. The next step was to find a dragon to use as an ingredient for the feast. Unexpectedly, the white dragon offered to take its flesh. So Lushel decided to cut off a portion of its tail. He accomplished the task, then used his sword to strike down, severing a piece of flesh from the dragon's tail. The blow sent the dragon's entire body trembling with icy cold. At this point, it started behaving like a child again, but this time it was out of extreme pain. Lushel tried to comfort it, but the tail regenerated itself shortly afterward. Then the dragon told Lushel to continue preparing the meal. That time, he decided to make a steak, grilling it directly on a hot stone. Initially, the dragon stood at a distance, drooling with desire, but Lushel resolutely refused to feed it immediately. It waited a few more seconds, but eventually, it could no longer be patient. So, it used its claws to snatch the steak from the hot rock. The steak was too hot for the dragon, causing it to instinctively toss the meat into the air. It gave no thought whatsoever to the consequences if the piece of meat fell to the ground, and as expected, the steak fell, leaving all three of them stunned. But the one most heartbroken was the dragon, who was about to burst into tears because its favorite food had fallen and been lost. Lushel quickly rushed over, picked up the steak, and emphatically declared that he had picked it up within 3 seconds, so it was still edible. The situation was incredibly childish, but all three pretended nothing had happened. The atmosphere temporarily calmed down, but then everything changed completely. The dragon was so enraged with Lushel because of that, and without hesitation, it unleashed a blast of dragon breath. That's how the story ends. And ever since, the white dragon has remained angry with Lushel because of this. Those who heard the story were shocked, as it was utterly absurd. Yet the two started arguing right in front of everyone. Freddie stepped forward, apologizing on behalf of the group for the incident from years ago. Meanwhile, family members discussed the dragon's mental state, as no one could believe it had been angry for so long. Finally, Clavis understood the situation, summoned the dragon, and personally offered it a special meal to atone for its mistake. Karim immediately stopped Lushel from saying anything more. The dragon appeared indifferent, but in reality, it was drooling with desire. Clavis didn't press the matter further, simply turned and walked away calmly, saying he would hold a party to reward those who had fought so hard. At this point, Lushel was in charge of the cooking, and the head chef was ready to set up a small kitchen right there. Preparations were being made in a hurry, while others gathered to watch how the master chef would perform. Lushel tied a bandana around himself and pulled a huge chunk of meat from his bag. He revealed that it was the meat of mountain oaks, the most ferocious and extremely dangerous animal species. Even more remarkably, this piece of meat has been preserved for 50 years. This has led many to worry whether it is still edible. To dispel any doubts, Lushel told Freddie to touch the meat to check its purity, and as soon as Freddie touched it, he felt its perfect tenderness. This demonstrates that oak's meat naturally softens over time. In short, the longer oak's meat is aged, the more its texture and flavor are enhanced. The next question arises, is the outer layer of mold safe? Lushel quickly addressed the question by cutting the piece of meat in half and showing everyone that the inside was perfectly clean. This reassured everyone. Some people came forward to ask more questions about the origin of the meat, and Lushel revealed that it was originally as big as a whole mountain. He only cut a small portion of it. Finally, the introduction to the meat was complete, and everyone was eagerly anticipating the dish, but once again, the dragon refused, even though its mouth was watering with desire. The cooking process began, and as before, Lushel continued to grill the meat on the hot stone. The aroma of the meat was subtle yet alluring, making everyone's mouth water. To make it even more appealing, Lushel arranged the food exquisitely on a rock. And finally, the aged mountain oak meat is ready. The dining table was neatly prepared, and everyone was invited to eat before the food got cold. Clevis decided to be the first to try. His knife easily glided through the piece of meat. It proved to be perfectly tender, just as expected. The moment Clevis took his first bite, everyone held their breath, waiting for his reaction. Clevis felt like he'd entered paradise with just the first bite. The exquisite taste of the meat was so captivating that he couldn't help but praise it. And those words were enough to make everyone anticipate more. Immediately after finishing his meal, he noticed others waiting to try the first bite. Realizing he had been too hasty, Clevis quickly apologized and invited everyone to enjoy the delicious dish. As expected, just one bite is enough to let everyone appreciate the tenderness and rich flavor of the meat. They briefly praised the food, but then realized that Freddie hadn't eaten a single bite. Freddie seemed anxious, not because of the food, but because the other knights were still up in the mountains, waiting to return. This prevented him from enjoying the meal as comfortably as the others. Noticing this, Clevis quickly stepped in to reprimand Freddie, telling him to enjoy the meal instead of worrying so much. If he continued like this, he would spoil the enjoyment of all the knights who were enjoying the feast. Freddie understood and felt guilty. Then he bowed his head in sincere prayer before deciding to take the first bite. The moment the flavor melted in his mouth, Freddie felt like he was entering heaven. He couldn't help but praise the tenderness and exquisite taste of the meat. Lushel listened to the compliments and felt immensely happy, knowing that his cooking skills had provided the knights with a complete and relaxing meal after their strenuous battles. Meanwhile, the dragon witnessed it all and felt completely forgotten. Those around it were enjoying themselves, immersed in the festivities, seemingly oblivious to its presence. During the conversation, Mildy unexpectedly suggested that Lushel open a restaurant, and the others enthusiastically supported the idea, asserting that they would certainly be the first customers. Shortly afterward, the head chef joined the conversation and invited Lushel to help out in the kitchen if he wished, as his cooking skills were truly outstanding. Clevis agreed and immediately nicknamed Lushel the Duke's chef. The name quickly became popular, and from then on, everyone started calling him by that title. Suddenly, a scream rang out, startling everyone. They were all bewildered, not understanding what was happening. A girl suddenly burst in, ignoring the surprised looks around her, and went straight to Lushel. She was not happy with the title, the Duke's Chef. Instead, she requested that it be changed to the Duke's Chef. Everyone around tried calling her by that name in surprise, but the girl kept repeating it excitedly, as if she wanted everyone to acknowledge her new title. While everyone was still confused about the identity of the strange girl, her true purpose was finally revealed. She unexpectedly pounced on the meat that Lushel had just prepared, ate it with relish, and without hesitation asked for a second portion, then a third. Everyone was still wondering, who exactly was this girl who could brazenly barge into the middle of the party and enjoy the delicious food like that? Lushel took the opportunity to introduce the girl to everyone, saying that she was White Dragon. This truth sent shivers down everyone's spine. No one could believe that such a fierce and majestic dragon could appear in the form of a little girl. Mildy immediately dismissed it, saying it was impossible. But no sooner had she finished speaking than she demonstrated her true strength by screaming in anger. Lushel quickly tried to comfort her, and Clevis joined in, calling her Duchess, even though she didn't actually hold that title. However, this didn't stop the little girl from continuing to devour the party, eating heartily as if she had never eaten before. Seeing an opportunity, Clevis directly asked if she was willing to forgive Lushel for the trouble he had caused. Bach Long thought for a moment, then immediately refused, even though she was enjoying a meal cooked by Lushel herself. After eating the last bite, the little girl declared that only two things could make her overlook this matter. First, she wants to eat dragon steak regularly. Secondly, she was angry that Lushel had left the forest without telling her, and now was preparing to leave again. Just as Lushel was about to retort, she suddenly blushed, instantly making everyone realize the conversation was heading in a different direction. White Dragon, sensing the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, decided to let Lucial off the hook, but with one condition. That condition came from Clavis, that she must be welcomed as a guest into the mansion. Everyone was shocked by this request, but the little girl calmly explained that if she were allowed to be there, they could enjoy the dragon steak whenever they wanted. Clavis immediately agreed to that condition without a second thought. However, Lucial was not at all pleased with this decision. Meanwhile, the happiest person was the White Dragon. Lucial was still confused as to why the little girl wanted to live here. It seems like it's time someone taught him about girls' feelings. Mildy tried to explain, but then her face flushed and she couldn't finish the sentence. That even left Leila feeling awkward. She could only tell Lucial to realize it himself. At that moment, Bach Long stepped forward and introduced herself properly, so that everyone could address her by a more appropriate name while in the mansion. She revealed her real name was Urine, and that the dragon tail was still hidden under her dress. Lucial chuckled softly, for even though she had lived for over 300 years, he still didn't understand much about the world. But in the past few days, he's learned a great deal. After all, he survived it all. Everyone was excited, and that's how one of the most boisterous nights in manga came to a close. Clavis finally realized that the curse had been broken, and the White Dragon was Urine. The house finally returned to peace, and he decided to say something to Litra. The scene shifts to a few days later, when Lucial enters the Duke's room and asks why he was summoned. During the conversation, Clavis produced a piece of paper bearing a seal, stating that there was an important matter to be discussed. The scene shifts again, this time with Uran sitting next to them, seemingly involved in the discussion. That day was also Lady Sophie's day, but Urine was angry because she wasn't being recognized, even though she was the one who had broken the curse. Leila takes on the task of explaining to the little girl that only those who dare to stand up and fight against a fearsome dragon are truly honored. However, Lady Sophie's family remains immensely grateful to Urine for lifting their mother's curse. Suddenly, Venson approached, startling the little girl. He reminded her to sit properly, as she didn't look like a well-behaved child at all. Under Venson's guidance, Uran gradually learned proper manners. But eventually, upon realizing he was actually a dragon, Urine reverted to his mischievous nature. The big day has finally begun, and the stage is ready. The first to emerge was Captain Freddy, who marched down the red carpet, sword in hand, toward the throne, and then knelt before Duke Clavis. Clavis was extremely pleased, as Freddy had kept his promise. To express his gratitude, Clavis thanked him for helping to break the dragon curse that had afflicted his wife. Freddy humbly accepted the compliment, then returned the sword to the Duke. However, Clavis unexpectedly noticed that the sword had changed its appearance, and he pretended to scold Freddy for his poor management. Freddy froze, not knowing how to respond. Just then, Clavis burst out laughing, saying that he had known about this all along. Freddy tried to return the sword again, but Clavis refused. He officially appointed Freddy as the sword's new owner, as a gift to acknowledge his achievements and contributions over the years. Ultimately, Freddy was given back the Lativia family's ancestral sword, the Flame Tan, and was bestowed the title of Knight of the Flames. Everyone present at the ceremony was astonished by the great honor Freddy had just received. Freddy was silent for a moment, then solemnly swore that he would use his life to protect his country. Clavis then draped a cloak over Freddy as a symbol of honor. At that moment, Freddy raised his sword high, shouting with great determination, vowing to bring glory to the Lativia family. Lucial was the happiest person at the ceremony because Freddy was the one who had changed his life, bringing him from the desolate mountains to warm beds and a sheltered home. From the bottom of his heart, he was grateful and sincerely congratulated Freddy on his achievements. Then the ceremony moved on to the next honorary part. Duke Clavis called Lucial's name, asking him to step forward. In the presence of everyone, he solemnly declared that, as the head of the Lavisha family, he had decided to officially adopt Lucial. The entire audience was shocked by this announcement, especially the knights. They couldn't believe what they had just heard and kept asking for confirmation. The scene then shifts back to the past, to that particular day. That day, Clavis informed Lushel that he received approval from the capital to allow him to adopt a child into the Lavisha family. Lushel was taken aback, but then Clavis gently asked him if he wanted to become an adopted son of the Lavisha family. Clavis's true intention was not only to protect him, but also to help him uphold the honor of the Tristan family, Lushel's original family. However, Lushel was most worried that if this news spread outside, it could negatively impact Lavisha's family. Noticing that the boy was putting pressure on himself, Clavis gently reassured him, telling him that bloodlines and parents are gifts, not choices one makes. Moreover, kindness is not bound by blood ties. Those words opened up a whole new world for Lushel. He pondered for a moment, then declared that he truly wanted to stay with everyone in this house. Afterward, he timidly asked if it would be good if they became a real family. Back at the ceremony, Clavis solemnly announced that from now on the boy's name would be Lushel Grand Lativia. The knights and everyone present erupted in cheers, applauding him wholeheartedly. Lushel flashed a radiant smile, then turned to look at everyone, curious to see how they would thank him. Clavis was slightly displeased by that attitude, so Lushel called him father again and sincerely thanked him for the respect shown to him. After all, parents always feel warm-hearted when their son calls them that. Immediately afterwards, the head chef urged everyone to quickly begin the feast. Since the real celebration hadn't officially begun yet, Lushel excitedly offered to help out in the kitchen, but the head chef immediately stopped him and disagreed. He sternly stated that the family always ate together, so Lushel should sit down and enjoy the meal with everyone. Leila happily ran up, grabbed Lushel's hand, and immediately led him away to a place they called an incomplete family. Urin was puzzled by this, feeling something was strange. Vincent smiled and gently explained that blood ties weren't the only thing that connected a family. It was mutual understanding and support that truly made it so. Vincent continued to express his wish that Uran would also be a part of this family. Uran was confused by the offer, but as soon as Lushel called out, the little girl ran after her, saying that she would also be a part of this family. In another mansion, a half-human was whispering to someone that the Lavisha family had adopted a child. The listener suddenly froze, seemingly realizing there was something more to it. Then she became visibly interested, saying she would soon go to see the boy. Back at Lativia Manor, Lushel was running down the hallway with a radiant smile. 3 weeks had passed since he began living at Lativia Manor, and now he was gradually getting used to his new life. But today wasn't an ordinary day. Lushel was incredibly excited, because from today onwards, he was allowed to work in the kitchen. As soon as he entered, he greeted everyone with great enthusiasm. Sonyo nodded at him, but didn't forget to remind him beforehand that he wouldn't receive any special treatment here. Lushel's first task of the day was washing dishes. A seemingly simple chore, but it was his first test. The staff members guided Lushel through the process, but didn't forget to act a little condescending, speaking to him in a somewhat arrogant manner. Lushel didn't hold a grudge, accepted the task, and got to work immediately. While busy, Lushel quietly observed the other chefs at work. He quickly realized that the cooking methods here were completely different from those in the mountains. But while he was lost in thought, an employee noticed him staring blankly and immediately scolded him for being absent-minded. Lushel continued his work, then held up a stack of gleaming plates. They shone so brightly under the light that they were more reflective than mirrors. Everyone was stunned and amazed. Lushel calmly explained that he had used the slime from acid slime to clean the stain. However, the staff member was displeased and immediately asked who gave him permission to do that. Although harmless, they still wanted to remind him not to use anything without permission. Even common foods can cause allergies, so he needed to be more careful. This reminder helped Lushel realize his mistake. Another employee also advised him to ask for permission before doing anything. Lushel understood the problem and sincerely apologized for his carelessness. Just then, the head chef walked in, puzzled by the lengthy argument. The staff member summarized the incident, saying that Lushel had used slime to wash dishes, Hearing this, the head chef decided to investigate immediately. He took a plate, cleaned it with acid slime, and then tasted a portion. The head chef stated that this method is safe and can be applied in the kitchen. However, he sternly reminded Lucial that before making any decisions, he needed to consider everyone around him. To become a true chef, he couldn't act rashly. Then, the head chef ordered everyone to continue preparing the meal. The scene shifts to the dining table, where Lucial lavishes praise on the chefs. People also started discussing the possibility that slime could become a useful cleaning agent. Lucial completely agreed. Then, Lucial and everyone else went to a special location, a swamp full of slime. This trip was arranged by Clavis, with the aim of collecting slime as a material. The main goal is to share the slime crystallization technique to increase collection efficiency in the future. Clavis called for Lucial to step forward, but seeing his hesitation, he lightly punched him, leaving him with no other choice. Nevertheless, Lucial calmly introduced the technique to the crowd, asserting that with perseverance, anyone could master it. He acted very cool, then thanked everyone for their cooperation. After that, he looked towards Clavis, expecting to be appreciated, but in the end, I only received a total of 95 points. The mission officially resumes. Lucial ordered the team to spread out, preparing to lure slime out. Mildy has an extremely sensitive sense of smell, so she quickly recognized the foul odor of what they were using. It's pig's blood. This substance attracts slime, and Lucial personally sprinkles it to demonstrate how to do it. However, a question arises. Slime doesn't have a nose. So how do they smell things? Clavis explained that it is the outer layer of slime that is reactive, allowing them to detect scents. Lucial understood this principle just as strange ripples began to appear on the surface of the lake. This is a sign that the slime is surfacing. When they saw a huge number of slimes appear, everyone was stunned. The slimes began to attack, forcing Lucial and the soldiers to retreat. Freddy drew his sword, ready to fight, but Lucial stopped him. Then he took matters into his own hands, guiding them on how to capture the slimes. He skillfully peeled away their outer shells, preventing them from dissolving. Then, he used his domination skill to make all the slimes stand still in place. Litra was stunned to see him use such a high-level skill. Finally, Lucial ordered the slimes to line up, and astonishingly, they obeyed immediately, without a moment's hesitation. The slimes obediently followed their master's every command. The girls present couldn't hide their delight, as the sight of the tiny slimes moving in unison was adorable and soft. Once everything was ready, Lucial began instructing everyone on the techniques for crystallizing slime. Everyone was highly focused, trying their best to complete the task. Meanwhile, Lucial left the training area, as he had his own plans. The day passed quickly, and night gradually fell. After a long day of training, everyone was exhausted. Just then, Mildy smelled a wonderful fragrance. As expected, they all immediately followed the scent and discovered that Lucial had prepared a lavish meal. There was enough food for everyone to enjoy. Everyone was incredibly excited, because tonight they would be eating a meal cooked by Lucial herself. Lucial was also happy to be able to energize everyone after a hard day's work. The main course for dinner tonight is giragara, a type of crocodile dumpling. Litra was stunned when she heard the name of the dish. Lucial calmly explained that the crocodile had just been caught by hand, and then meticulously described the processing steps. Lucial explained that giragara crocodile meat has a texture similar to chicken, and can be prepared into a delicious steak or crispy fried chicken. He combined crocodile meat with vegetables, adding various spices to create the filling for the dumplings. The broth is made from giragara crocodile bones, giving it a rich flavor. However, it seemed no one was really listening to his explanation, as everyone eagerly filled their bowls and began enjoying the meal immediately. The party that night was filled with joy. Everyone was immersed in the wonderful flavors of the food, and their fatigue seemed to vanish. Clavis savored the dumpling and remarked that the combination of juicy crocodile meat and crisp cabbage created a perfect flavor. Kareem paid no attention to the chatter, focusing only on the bowl of soup in front of him, then took a large gulp and looked extremely satisfied. Everyone thanked Lushel in unison for the wonderful meal. However, he humbly reminded them that they should also thank Leila, as she had helped him a great deal during the preparation process. As a father, Clavis couldn't hide his pride at seeing his children able to create such delicious dishes together. Finally, after 3 days of training, everyone had mastered the technique of crystallizing slime. The knights were able to easily capture the slimes, and one by one they succeeded in crystallizing them. Eventually, they caught a lot of slimes, but were completely unaware that a commotion awaited them at the mansion. One day, a maid approached and asked Lushel to accompany her to the laundry room. He obediently followed instructions, but upon arrival, a scene of chaos unfolded before his eyes. Countless clothes were piled on the floor, all belonging to the slime crystallization training team. The maid reported that the slime from the slime couldn't be washed off, causing great distress to the other maids. Some were apprehensive about facing the young master, but the maid continued to complain, saying that the training had caused them a lot of trouble. Before she could say anything more, Litra suddenly appeared, stepped forward, and slapped her. "I demand an explanation as to why you raised your voice at the young master." The two began arguing fiercely about Lushel's situation. Litra defended him, insisting that she was not allowed to say such things. Meanwhile, the maid Kana refused to back down, insisting that she was only fulfilling her duties as a housekeeper. The tense situation continued, but Lushel politely apologized to Kana for the trouble he had caused in an attempt to defuse the situation. He was someone who always had a solution to every problem, so he offered to take care of the pile of clothes. Initially, the maids were skeptical, not believing that he could wash away the slime. Lushel requested a basin of warm water, then added a mysterious solution to it. This piqued everyone's curiosity, leaving them wondering what it was. Once the mixture was completely dissolved, they began soaking the clothes in the basin and gently washing them. Finally, all the stains disappeared, and the clothes became sparkling white, completely clean. Much to their surprise, the maids asked him about the ingredients of the solution. Lushel smiled and revealed that it was the slime from acid slime. Once again, slime proved its usefulness. Not stopping there, the head butler went on to ask if the solution could clean the armor. Lushel had a solution ready. He introduced a new type of slime called soda slime. Then, Lushel used her fusion skill to combine 2 different types of slime. It becomes a neutral type of slime. When one of the maids tried it, she discovered that it worked incredibly well. Others quickly followed suit and found cleaning easier than ever. A single gentle scrub was enough to make the stains disappear completely. This type of slime can clean everything, much to the delight and joy of the maids as they see their clothes become sparkling white like new. However, when Lushel looked down at their hands, he felt a little uneasy. The maids just laughed and said it was nothing to worry about, as they had been doing this for a long time. The head housekeeper also agreed that this was normal for them, and that as long as they had the trust of their employer, they were happy with their job. Others consider it a stroke of luck, because this job is still much easier than other strenuous jobs. In addition, they were delighted to receive a gift from their young master. Lushel reassured them that this neutral slime was very good for their hands and could help them avoid injury. However, what saddened him most was that most of the maids here were elderly. He was relegated to working behind the scenes simply because of his age. As he turned his back, a shocking sight unfolded before him. Kana was kneeling and beginning to murmur unbelievable words. Kana couldn't believe that someone cared about their hands and even offered such a helpful cleaning product. Lushel looked confused, repeatedly asking what was happening to her. Suddenly, Kana completely changed, shouting that she couldn't take it anymore. Immediately afterward, she tore off her maid's outfit and flew into the air, and rushed straight towards Lushel, calling him the master of the house. Litra rushed to rescue her master and apologized for Kana's strange behavior. In reality, Kana was a vampire. She explained that, although vampires drink blood to survive, they also enjoy delicious food. What puzzled everyone even more was why Canna had suddenly changed her attitude towards Lushel. She said that he was the same kind as her. They called him by affectionate terms and said he was the embodiment of absolute cuteness. Although she initially tried to control her emotions, after hearing everything Lushel had done, she couldn't resist any longer. When she revealed her true age was 197 years old, Canna unexpectedly proposed to Lushel right there on the spot. Rachel had to intervene again to stop her from continuing her bizarre behavior. The argument between the girls started again, and this scene seemed all too familiar to Litra and Mildy. Lushel finally realized that this world truly had many different races and people. Time passed. A month had gone by since he started working in the kitchen, and now he had been assigned tasks other than washing dishes. One day, the head chef unexpectedly appeared and asked Lushel to prepare a special meal. The other staff members expressed concern, saying it was too early for him to do it, but the head chef dismissed their opinion. He also mocked an employee who had attempted to create his first dish but failed miserably, and the other employees joined in the teasing. His name was Jansen, and this time, the head chef assigned him the task of mentoring Lushel. This was a truly difficult challenge for a newcomer like Jansen, as he had to mentor someone with such extraordinary abilities as Lushel. The head chef encouraged Jansen to act like an older brother, which motivated him further. Immediately, Jansen approached Lushel and told him to prepare himself because he was going to seriously and diligently guide him. The day's work was finally over, and Jansen officially took on the role of mentoring Lushel. The first lesson he taught the boy was how to utilize leftover vegetables and ingredients to prepare meals for the kitchen staff. This is how they save money, and this rule was set by the head chef. No one is allowed to break it. Jansen then went on to talk about the problems they often encountered in the kitchen, such as running out of ingredients or not having enough of certain essential components. Therefore, if you want to become a good chef, you must know how to adapt to what is available. The most difficult thing for Lushel that day was that he wasn't allowed to use animal meat in his cooking. He was extremely surprised to learn that his cooking skills would be put to a real test. He was faced with a perplexing question. How could he create a delicious dish using only leftover ingredients? However, Lushel was not discouraged and decided to give it a try. A little later, when he brought his dish out to Jansen, the latter commented that the flavor was quite good but lacked depth. Lushel was also aware of this and understood that he still hadn't done well enough. So Jansen proceeded with a second attempt to show Lushel how to utilize the different ingredients for their respective purposes. He performed everything with absolute clarity. This made Lushel realize that Jansen's cooking skills were far superior to his own. Every part of the dish seemed to speak for itself. Remind him that cooking is not just about preparing animal meat, but is also a profound art form. It requires you to explore more things. Suddenly, Leila walked into the kitchen, bringing tea as a gesture of encouragement for those working hard. After a hard day's work, they enjoy a relaxing cup of tea. Leila also expressed interest in the meal that Lushel would be preparing for the staff. She was really looking forward to trying it out and even suggested they make a pinky promise. After making her promise, she left, and the team of chefs continued to work diligently to complete their task. 3 days later, the crucial moment finally arrived. Lushel had to personally prepare the meal for the staff. That day, he made oyakodon. Despite being made from leftover ingredients, its appearance was so appealing that even the head chef was surprised. The people in the kitchen had the same reaction, and Lushel explained that all the ingredients were leftovers from previous meals and that he had also used extra eggs to complete the dish. The 3 people in the kitchen took the first bite at the same time, and immediately, a silence fell over the kitchen. That moment lasted quite a while before their expressions changed, and they all unanimously agreed that the dish was truly delicious and pleasant. Everyone offered comments on how Lushel skillfully combined the different ingredients, making the most of each component to create a flavorful dish. One of them noticed the special quality of the silver rice in the dish. Immediately, The head chef understood that this silver rice had been cooked with wine, creating the dish silver rice with wine. Upon hearing Lachelle's confirmation, the head chef was even more impressed. He continuously praised the boy's efforts in pushing his own limits. Another employee, curious, asked about the side dishes, and Lachelle explained that it's ohitashi, made from carrot leaves, which gives it a crispy texture. Everyone was amazed by this creation, as it was both unique and delicious. The moment the head chef tasted the side dish, his eyes widened in astonishment. He was completely shocked to see how quickly a child like Lachelle could learn and create such a perfect combination. Lachelle thanked the chef for the compliments. The two kitchen staff members were also waiting for Jansen's reaction, hoping he would praise Lachelle. However, Jansen suddenly asked about how he had prepared the chicken. Lachelle frankly revealed that he had used chicken that had died the day before, strictly following kitchen rules. However, Jansen was still not entirely convinced. Looking at the texture of the meat, he realized that chicken meat that has died usually loses its tenderness. But the chicken in this dish has an unusually soft and elastic texture. A question popped into his head. Was Lachelle using fresh chicken to impress people? If the boy did indeed break the rule, the consequences would be very serious, possibly resulting in a complete ban from the kitchen. While other employees were still waiting for an answer, Jansen found himself in a state of indecision. He was unsure whether to speak up or remain silent to protect Lachelle. Finally, unable to shake off his suspicions, he rose from the table and declared that old chicken could never possibly be that tender. His words created tension in the kitchen, and the head chef immediately spoke up to confirm whether Lachelle had actually violated the rules. Jansen confirmed that Lachelle had followed the regulations correctly, but he was still willing to take responsibility for not guiding the boy better. He accepted any punishment, as long as it could protect Lachelle from being fired from the kitchen. However, before making a decision, the head chef wanted to hear Lachelle's opinion. Lachelle immediately denied all the accusations. This left Jansen stunned. He explained that he had marinated the meat with a special type of mushroom. This helps tough meat become tender and regain its original texture. Others gradually realized that he wasn't cheating at all, but simply taking advantage of his experimental experience from his time living in the mountains. Hearing this, Jansen breathed a sigh of relief, but couldn't help but grab the boy by the collar, scolding him for making him worry so much. After calming down, Jansen sincerely apologized to Lachelle, but Lachelle thanked him for standing up for him. They looked at each other with respect, and the scene made those around them feel as if they were witnessing a real couple. As the conversation continued, the chef realized that Jansen had truly matured. Finally, to complete the meal, Lachelle brewed a special tea, onion tea, made from the outermost layer of the onion bulb. Although it has a slightly bitter taste, it's very good for the blood, so all the kitchen staff drink it all. Once all the dishes had been served, everyone turned their eyes to Jansen, awaiting his final answer on whether Lachelle had passed the test. Jansen thought for a moment, and then remarked that the umami flavor hadn't been fully expressed. He had to use more vegetables to enhance the taste, which meant a bit of a waste of ingredients. Lachelle immediately realized his mistake. Jansen went on to point out some imperfections, and Lachelle honestly admitted that he had failed the test. But Jansen soon denied that, stating that the boy had indeed passed, but still had areas for improvement. Nevertheless, Jansen praised Lachelle's dish and encouraged him to continue practicing. Lachelle learned a new lesson. Cooking has no limits. There's always something to learn and improve upon. He sincerely thanked Jansen for his guidance. The head chef agreed with this assessment and then unexpectedly called out to someone from behind. The head of the family appeared, creating a tense atmosphere. He apologized to his son for not informing him about the test beforehand. In fact, Lachelle's father had planned for him to appear at the food festival and prepare signature dishes made from monsters. This stunned all the staff in the kitchen, and even Lachelle was surprised. To clarify further, Clavis stated that this summer they planned to hold the official launch of Lachelle at the festival. In other words, it was an event intended to introduce him as the son of the Duquel family. However, this statement was not received positively by Lachelle. He felt uncomfortable that the reason for participating wasn't because of a blood relationship with the Duke. Instead, he had to participate in a competition to prove his worth and gain recognition from others. Jansen disagreed with that way of thinking, asserting that blood relations didn't matter and that the boy needed an official debut regardless. Clavis also emphasized the same point, that there is no difference between adopted and biological children. Lushel suddenly remembered the truth that he was merely a created being, with no blood relation. However, his father had never asked him to appear before people as his son. From the beginning, Lushel wasn't his son. Clavis noticed Lushel's pale face and understood that this was his first official debut. As soon as he agreed, Clavis asked Lushel for permission to make his debut in front of everyone. He wanted to be proud of his son, and so the boy readily agreed. With an open heart, Lushel also asked permission to serve his special dish. His enthusiastic spirit excited everyone and made them look forward to the upcoming event. A few days later, Lushel and his dragon prepared to set off to gather ingredients for a monster-based meal. Sophie. As a mother, she was somewhat worried about him, but Euron was happy that he was progressing on the path she loved. The biggest surprise for everyone was that Leila wasn't there to see him off. This led them to make many speculations about the girl's absence. In fact, Leila had secretly hidden in Lushel's luggage. Without further hesitation, Euron immediately transformed back into his dragon form, and so they both decided to take off and fly away, thanking and saying goodbye to those who remained. Just then, the head butler appeared with a letter for the master, announcing that Leila would be joining her brother on an upcoming expedition. After a while, Lushel finally took Leila out of the pouch, allowing her to relax and enjoy the fresh air under the open sky. They continued their journey, but as soon as the children started shouting with excitement, Euron immediately sped up. On the way, the two siblings talked about the potential consequences they might face upon returning. But as usual, Leila showed no signs of worry. The little girl was even more excited to visit the palace where her brother had lived for a long time. Before long, they arrived, and Lushel quickly jumped down from Euron's back. Then he introduced his younger sister to the palace where he once lived. Leila simply observed the scene before her in silence, then expressed her feelings for the place. The little girl also didn't forget to thank the dragon for bringing her here safely. As soon as Euron transformed back into her human form, she curiously asked what they would do next. Before Lushel could reply, a sudden, strong gust of wind blew up from the giant sun trees. This is a special type of tree. It moves only using solar energy and rarely sways during the day. Euron's eyes sparkled at the sight, but her joy was quickly extinguished when Lushel refused something. Lushel himself was also waiting for something to appear, so he immediately hid behind the bushes along with everyone else. The crucial moment had arrived, and they discovered that the creatures that had appeared were cacophants. Although they looked quite disgusting, they certainly had no intention of eating them. After collecting resin from the bees, the group began tracking them according to plan. However, before moving, Lushel instructed everyone to put on chameleon skins to avoid being detected. All three quickly donned their camouflage and began following the swarm of bees, holding hands tightly to avoid getting lost. Finally, they found their target of the day, the cacao bee's nest. The two girls still didn't understand why they needed this beehive, but Lushel knew that it was not only valuable, but also incredibly delicious. Without hesitation, Lushel immediately used his special skill. Begin creating a stream of cold air to blow around the beehive. The goal is to paralyze the bees with the low temperature. When the plan succeeds, all the bees fell to the ground motionless. The others remained hidden behind the bushes, while Lushel approached to retrieve the beehive. However, none of them realized that a surprise attack was about to happen, an attack by a magical creature. Lushel immediately realized that its target was him. Without hesitation, he ordered Euron to protect Leila while he continued to run to avoid the attack. During the fight, he quickly realized that this was a formidable enemy. It wasn't easy to deal with. But when he decided to take the battle more seriously, a surprising truth was revealed. The monster was actually Alma. Alma suddenly appeared, and joy erupted upon seeing her old friend. It was an emotional reunion between friends who are over 300 years old. Alma explained that he rushed in because he thought the cacao bee colony was under attack by an unknown enemy. As the protector of the place, he was simply doing his duty. After listening to Lushel's explanation, the two quickly reconciled. The story then shifts to the bee palace. Leila remains worried about her brother, while Urine, feeling frustrated, she took off her cloak. Leila tried to reason with her, but Urine wasn't the type to easily listen to advice. However, this time, Leila refused to back down. She patiently listened to Euron, not just as a companion, but as a member of family. Urine realized the conversation was family-like, but instead of participating, she began to see herself as merely a guest in this family. As a divine dragon, she always considered herself a solitary entity, with no need for a family. Those words were like arrows piercing Leila's little heart, leaving her deeply hurt. Even Urine began to wonder if she really needed a family. Leila persistently explained that Urine was also part of their family, but in the midst of their argument, they completely forgot about the cacao bees. A large swarm of those bees flew nearby. Sensing danger, Euron immediately grabbed Leila and dashed away as fast as she could to avoid being attacked. The escape lasted a while, but they were eventually safe. Just as Euron was beginning to understand the meaning of family, the sun trees unexpectedly emitted strange sounds when they began to move. Intrigued by this change, Euron curiously used his finger to dig a small hole in the tree trunk and asked Leila to taste the sap inside. They said it tasted delicious. Leila believed them and followed the instructions. Euron showed Lilith how to eat properly, and then she tried it herself by putting her mouth directly into the food. But unexpectedly, the tree sap got all over her face, which made Leila laugh with delight. For the first time in her life, Euron felt the warmth of a family. The feeling was both confusing and delightful. Leila was also very happy to hear that and felt fortunate that they could see each other as real family. The two girls continued to enjoy the tree sap. He paid no attention to the dirt on his face. Just then, Luciel and Alma returned, and were immediately stunned to see the two girls eating in such a silly manner. The sight made him chuckle. Soon after, a small argument broke out between Alma and Euron. Alma, who didn't care about anything other than his forest, accepted the situation easily because Luciel was his friend. They quickly reached the bee colony, where Alma used her special communication abilities to talk to them. Fortunately, the bees agreed to let them take the cacao bee's nest, but only this one time. Luciel immediately thanked them for their generosity. Immediately afterward, he used his wind-cutting skill to take the beehive without harming any of the bees. Euron was the first to jump up and try the honey, and soon after, Leila also demanded a share, arguing that it wasn't fair if only Euron got to enjoy it. Their mission in that area was complete, so the group decided to head back, promising to return another time. On the way back, both girls were very excited, looking forward to enjoying the meal that Luciel had prepared. But none of them knew that an unexpected event would occur during the festival, completely changing the course of the story. As the final day of the festival arrived, Luciel's attire was carefully selected by her servants. They also didn't forget to praise the welcoming speech he had prepared. That day was the Lativia family's summer festival. Regardless of status or position, everyone could enjoy the lavish party together. Luciel stepped onto the stage and introduced himself as the son of Duke Clavis. He confidently declared that he would become as great as his father and hoped to receive good treatment from everyone. All the guests present, including members of the Greek aristocracy, appreciated the boy's promising demeanor. Taking this opportunity, Luciel's father also stood up to speak, praising his son. He proudly stated that Luciel had accumulated experience far exceeding his own when he was young. Then he invited everyone to enjoy the dish his son had prepared. When the cooking was complete and the party was over, Luciel felt a great sense of relief. As she left the stage, he encountered his two close female friends. Both were wearing incredibly beautiful traditional Japanese clothing. They both looked stunning, and one of them thanked him with all her heart on this special day. Lushel's teacher was also present at the festival, taking on the task of preparing the food so that he could have time to enjoy the event. He gently pushed Lushel outside to play, and the boy was incredibly grateful for that gesture. In fact, it was Clavis who asked Lushel's teacher to do this, with a specific intention in mind. Lushel quickly immersed himself in the lively atmosphere of the festival, exploring each stall with delight. With each step, he discovered more interesting things, savoring the moment to the fullest.